in fact, a few minutes ago, some guy wandered off into the history of World War I. But let's see what they're up to right now.
Far. Now, I think it's difficult to know whether to be appalled at the morality of this invitation or just astonished at the stupidity of the invitation. As an example of fawning subservience, if I could disagree with my honourable friend for a second, the Prime Minister's holding hands across the ocean visit would be difficult to match. To do it in the name of shared values was stomach-churning. What exactly are the shared values that this House, that this country, would hope to have with President Trump? Now,
this is brilliant.
Exemplifying what shared values are is a process fraught with danger. But the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary, tried it. She said, there are things like democracy, a belief in the rule of law, a belief in tolerance for other people, equality, and acceptance of other people's faiths and religion. Now, which of these values, as outlined by the Prime Minister, has President Trump exemplified in his first 30 days in office? 30 days, I give way to the honourable lady.
Yeah, so there we go. Okay, now they're going back to a conservative. They're basically, it looks like it's going back and forth, Labor Tory. And he's like, are you kidding me? Theresa May, the Prime Minister, says we share values with the Trump administration. And does he, honor the free press? Does he? No, not a chance. It's also President's Day. A lot of people have the day off. It's a bank holiday and it's a federal holiday. The town here in Washington, D.C. is relatively deserted. Traffic was nice coming in this morning. But this is the day that we honor our past presidents. It's the mashing together, actually, of Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday. But my favorite president, at least in the modern era, and arguably my favorite president, period, is Franklin Roosevelt. And so I wanted to share a little bit of Franklin Roosevelt with you, too, as, just to kick the day off, just to give us a sense of nostalgia and also, remind you the DNC vote is going to be this weekend. That's going to be real interesting. And afterwards, I'm going to try and get somebody from the DNC to come on and talk about, who we end up electing to head the DNC and what direction it's going to, be going moving forward. But Franklin Roosevelt in 1936, specifically October 31st, 1936, gave a speech in Madison Square Garden. He was running for re-election. This was the month before the election. The election was the first week of November, the first Tuesday of November. This was the last week of October, so the election was a week later. And he, of course, won in a landslide. And he starts out talking about how when Warren Harding in 1920, a Republican, ran for president. At that time, the top tax rate was 91%. There was fairly good regulation, actually, of our banks. And Warren Harding ran on the campaign slogan of more business in government, less government in business. In other words, privatize, deregulate, put it in modern language, which, of course, is or profitize and deregulate, which, of course, is the mantra of the modern Republican Party. It was of the Republican Party back in 1936 as well, or back in 1920 when Harding ran. And FDR starts out talking about how the Harding administration, followed by the Coolidge administration, followed by the Hoover administration, these 12 years of Republican rule, which brought us the great crash of 1929, what was referred to up until the 1950s as the Republican Great Depression. That view of how politics should be done was so incredibly destructive, and how Hoover actually, and not just Hoover, I mean Coolidge and Harding as well, put what in today's dollars would be billionaires in their cabinet. Andrew Mellon, I think, is the most famous, the Treasury Secretary, the second or third richest guy in America. And so this is Franklin Roosevelt, October 31, 1936, a week before the election of 36 at Madison Square Garden. Here he is.
For 12 years, our nation was afflicted with hear nothing, see nothing, do nothing government.
So he's talking about the Harding Coolidge and Hoover administrations.
And my friends, powerful influences strive today to restore that kind of government with its doctrine that that government is best which is most indifferent to mankind.
Right, and see, that's the whole Paul Ryan thing. Government is best that's most indifferent to mankind, that governs least. He continues.
We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob.
And now we have, a billionaire president with a billionaire cabinet. It's like we're not learning the lessons of history. We are back there again. FDR goes on to say, they hate me, and I welcome their hatred. Here it is.
Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
And then the crowd just absolutely goes nuts. This is a long applause, but we can talk over it. And the FDR just came right out and said it over and over and over again. It's like, I would say he was channeling Bernie Sanders, but I think it's the other way around. It's like Bernie was channeling FDR. But this is, I welcome their hatred. And the crowd is like, yes! It's interesting because FDR did his own version of setting up the villain, only instead of the villain being the press and the institutions of democracy, which is what Trump is doing, the villain were the billionaires of the era who basically were trying to steal the country from us. He continues.
I should like to have it said of my first administration that in it the forces of selfishness and of lust for power met their match. I should like to have it said, wait a minute, I should like to have it said of my second administration that in it these forces met their master.
There you go. And he's like, basically elect me next week to my second term as president, and I will take names and kick ass. And he absolutely did. This Franklin Roosevelt, I think one of the finest presidents this country has ever had. He transformed the nature of the United States and of American democracy. And his spirit lives on. And such an important and vital spirit. We'll be back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls right after this. And welcome back. Debbie in Ashford, Connecticut, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Debbie, what's on your mind today?
I've been reading and hearing some things about deep state being ready to take over our government. It's kind of scary. Glenn Greenwald has addressed this, and then there was an article from Alternate where a professor was talking about this, that, particularly somebody like Trump could easily give way to the shadow government taking over our democracy. I mean, it sounds pretty scary.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, the deep state is. You could play it in a couple of different ways. On the one hand, it is arguably the permanent government, right? The NSA, the CIA, the Defense Department, the Pentagon, the State Department. There are all these agencies of the federal government, particularly those that have to do with policing powers and spying powers, and the ability to kill or to track you, that precede presidents and follow presidents. They looked at President Obama as, well, yeah, okay, he'll be here for 4 or 8 years, but we'll still be here after he's gone. And they're looking at Trump the same way. They're saying, yeah, Trump is coming in, but we'll still be here after he's gone. And the rise of the deep state really happened after World War II. I mean, it was, in fact, many of these institutions didn't even exist before World War II. And as Eisenhower pointed out in his farewell address in 1961, we literally had no permanent arms industry, no military-industrial complex before World War II. And after World War II, we had a substantial one, and it became relatively permanent. So that deep state has its own interests. Some of those interests, you could say, are actually good things. They're interested in the perpetuation of the government itself. And if we take Steve Bannon at his word, and Stephen Miller, about burning it down and being Leninists and wanting to overthrow the country and blah blah, or words to that effect, then having a deep state is a good thing, because it's that kind of a glacier, that doesn't move quickly. It's the stable part. On the other hand, there's an extraordinary amount of wealth and power concentrated in that deep state, and it will work to protect itself and defend itself, even against things like democracy. So it really, it depends on who you're talking to, how they're concerned about the deep state and why and whether. But it may actually, in the era of Trump, unless he succeeds in gaining control of the deep state, which I consider extremely unlikely, then it's going to be the moderating influence. And you're already seeing that with General Kelly, General Flynn. Flynn is gone, and Rex Tillerson and whatnot. They're all basically dancing to the tune of historic American values and standards and things, and it's so, which is arguably a good thing. But I get what you're saying, Debbie, and it's something that we all need to keep our eye on. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And boy, I seem to have recurrent Chrome problems. It's constantly crashing on me. It's very strange. Anyhow, let's see here. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call, and happy Monday.
Yeah, happy President's Day.
I was just going to bring up two things. One is, I think it's really disturbing that Trump is citing Fox News with no other resources, no other sources at all when he's talking about the terror attack in Sweden and
the horror of it. Did you see where the Prime Minister of Sweden tweeted just a few hours ago that there were more murders just in that part of Florida where Trump was giving his speech. There were more murders there last year by 50% than in the entire country of Sweden. He's like,
it doesn't surprise me. Who would go out there and spout facts without having?
Well, he saw it on Fox News and he believed it to be true. And this is actually, I think this is a crisis for America, because Fox News, one of the things we know, and you know, we saw this from that university study back 3 or 4 years ago, where they you know, asked people about their news consumption habits and found that people who watch basically CNN, MSNBC, PBS, whatever, they're more well-informed on the issues of the day than people who watch no TV at all. But Fox News viewers are actually more poorly informed. That is to say, they believe more things that aren't true than do people who don't watch any TV at all. And they don't know about things that are true more than people who don't watch TV at all. So Fox News is I mean, you know, you want the definition of the Lugan press, the lying press. It's Fox News. And this is, at least in my opinion, respectfully, and they would probably say the same thing about me. What can you say? I mean, but this is a danger to our republic when the President of the United States, instead of getting his information from the NSA or the CIA or the FBI, is getting it from watching right-wing whack job commentators on Fox so-called news and then repeating it in speeches. I mean, that's just like not a healthy thing. That's a real problem. So yeah, Marty, I'm with you. Thanks for the call. Donald in Aurora, Illinois, watching listening on WCPT. Hey, Donald, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You know, I'm fearing about them impeaching Donald Trump, because I'm always afraid that it'll unite his base, you know, making him a martyr. I was wondering, would it be best to let this clown run his 4 years, and this way the Republican Party will, the voters themselves might get things landing on their doorstep, because they certainly didn't learn their lesson when they gave us Bush and Cheney. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the Obama presidency was a response to Bush and Cheney. By 2008, people had figured out that George Bush and Dick Cheney had lied to us about Iraq, and to some extent had lied to us about Afghanistan as well, and gotten us into 2 absolutely unnecessary wars, and cost us, you know, billions in treasure and thousands of American lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives and Afghan lives in blood. And so there was that response. Trump, you know, my concern about Trump is that he has the potential to become the next Mussolini, you know, and whether we will be able to survive that or not, I don't know. He's doing a very, very good job of this. I mean, him and, you know, clearly Bannon understands the press. That news conference that was supposed to be impromptu last Friday, as I pointed out, you know, I got the email within minutes of it ending. It was not impromptu. This was carefully planned. They've decided to make the press the bad guy, the same way that FDR made the billionaires the bad guy, and there could be some serious damage done. And already, Trump is a martyr. I mean, you know, I run into people that I know who support Trump, and they're, you know, all these quote attacks on Trump are just actually strengthening their support. So it's a very strange thing. It's not actually. It's very predictable. Donald, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls and my thoughts right after this. This morning, the Senate Democrats spoke up about the Republicans' plans to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I believe one of the most articulate of the people who spoke was Senator Bernie Sanders. Afterwards, in fact, Chuck Schumer patted him on the back and said, "Thanks, buddy." And, you know, he's become Chuck Schumer's best friend. But I pointed this out to you I think it was 2 years ago, maybe just a year ago, when Chuck Schumer gave a speech here in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, and he laid out all these progressive principles. It was like Chuck Schumer, you know, the New York Democrat, I almost called him, the New York Democrat, who, you know, one of the most powerful men in the Senate, the most powerful Democrat in the Senate, starting not to talk like the classic kind of corporate Democrat, but instead talking like a progressive Democrat, like a FDR Democrat, like an LBJ Democrat, you know, and we played clips from that, and I said, watch this space. Everybody thinks Chuck Schumer is just, you know, go along, get along. He's the center of power in Washington, D.C. He's a fundraising machine for the Democrats in the Senate. That's what he does. That's what he's all about. That is, and all, you know, some of that perception may be accurate, but Chuck Schumer has been, over the last 2 years, in front of our very eyes, morphing himself into a genuine I believe a genuine progressive. And I think we saw more evidence of that this morning. Anyhow, here's what Bernie said when Chuck Schumer asked him to come up to the mic and speak.
Not a whole lot that I can add to what the previous speakers have said, but let me quote somebody who I suspect I will not often be quoting. On May 7th, 2015, Donald Trump tweeted, quote, "I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid." Now, the point is, Trump didn't just say this in passing. He didn't say it in the middle of the night. He didn't say it in a particular interview. This was a cornerstone of his campaign. He said it over and over and over again. Donald Trump said he will not cut Social Security. He will not cut Medicare. He will not cut Medicaid. Therefore, one of two things are true. Either Donald Trump simply lied to the elderly and the working people of this country and just made campaign promises that he had no intention of ever keeping. That is one reality. Or there is another reality, and that is right now, before Congress wastes an enormous amount of time, Donald Trump has got to come forward, maybe through a tweet, one of his tweets, and say clearly that Donald Trump will veto any legislation that cuts Medicare, that cuts Medicaid, or that cuts Social Security. And if he makes that clear to his Republican colleagues, we can save us all a whole lot of time and start getting to work doing what this country desperately needs to have done.
Good job, Bernie.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. And he's absolutely right. I've been saying this for a long, long time. In fact, I remember being on the air during the primaries when Trump said, that over and over again. Last week, we played you 5 different clips of Trump on the campaign stump saying, I will not cut Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare. Not going to happen. Ain't going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to allow it. And a lot of people voted for him based on that belief. But as we speak, Republicans in Congress are preparing to cut Social Security. They want to raise the eligibility age. They want to change the way the cost of living adjustments, are calculated, and they want to change the tax formula for taxes paid on Social Security, among other things. They're preparing to voucherize Medicare. This is, quite literally the Paul Ryan throwing grandma off the cliff ad from 2011. That ad, by the way, there's a link to it up at hartmanreport.com. But it's the original ad. It's the 2011 ad. I mean, it should be reprised. This is what they're about to do. And of course, anything that has to do with Medicaid, they want to block grant this so that individual states can just cut off people. So Bernie Sanders is right. Either Donald Trump lied cravenly and repeatedly to win the Republican nomination, which I kept saying, hey, this guy's running as a Democrat. Of course people are going to vote for him. They like the Democratic policies. They don't like Republican policies. Either he lied to his base in order to get elected, or he's going to be at war with his own party, in which case they may even try to impeach him, say, over the emoluments clause and put in Mike Pence, because Mike Pence is enthusiastic about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And, he's just a classic Republican. So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a real interesting next few weeks here.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a couple of quick things here. Well, actually, it's President's Day. I get to do this stuff on President's Day, don't I? Here is Franklin Roosevelt one more time. This time, this was right after he was elected. This is in 1933. And he gave a speech saying that we need to end politics for profit. Now, keep in mind, Donald Trump last week signed legislation that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell got through the House and the Senate, blowing up the stream protection rule that the law had prevented coal mining companies, particularly mountaintop removal coal mining companies, from dumping their waste in the rivers and streams and poisoning people downriver. And Donald Trump did away with that, so now they can pour more poison into the rivers and streams. To hell with the people downriver. And as Trump pointed out when he signed it, it'll increase the profits of the coal companies by $50 million. It's actually going to eliminate jobs, because there were jobs cleaning up that coal and disposing of that, coal waste appropriately. And now, all they need is one guy with a dump truck. But, this is what's going on. So we've got a profitized government. You got Betsy DeVos trying to profitize our schools. You got Scott Pruitt. He's going to try to profitize everything regarding the environment. If they can find a labor secretary, it just goes on and on. So this is FDR speaking to that kind of mentality that ruled the United States from 1921 to 1932, and of course destroyed our country the last time we really tried this experiment in a big way. Here he is speaking about the end of politics for profit. Alert, he uses some big words here, and the concepts are a little more complex than you might hear out of Donald Trump's mouth. So you have to listen carefully.
Recognition of that falsity of material wealth as the standard of success goes hand in hand with the abandonment of the false belief that public office and high political positions are to be valued only by the standards of pride of place and personal profit. And there must be an end to a conduct in banking and in business which too often has given to a sacred trust the likeness of callous and selfish wrongdoing.
There you go. So, the sacred trust, basically our banking system, and, enough of it, because the banksters brought us down, right? The banksters took us down in 1929. The banksters took us down in 2007, 2008. And the banksters are fixing to take us down again. Mark my words. It's just a matter of time. I mentioned the tweet from the Swedish Prime Minister. The Prime Minister Carl Bildt. Here's the exact tweet. He said, last year there were approximately 50% more murders only in Orlando/Orange in Florida, where Trump spoke the other day, than in all of Sweden. Bad. And Reuters. Now, Trump clarified. He tweeted, my statement as to what's happening in Sweden was in reference to a story that was broadcast on Fox News concerning immigrants in Sweden. And this was on Tucker Carlson's show. And it was this documentary filmmaker who said that, crime is exploding in Sweden because of all the immigrants. The Hill says, however, Reuters reported that crime rates in the country, Sweden, have decreased since 2005, even as hundreds of thousands of refugees have entered the country. Decreased. Li Fong tweeted something out this morning. I retweeted this. I thought it was brilliant. He said the media played a big role in internment, reported fake story. It starts out, there's a clip from the New York Times. And the headline is, fires set to aid enemy planes, flaming arrows planted by fifth columnist to guide foe towards Seattle. And what they were arguing was that Japanese farmers in Washington state were setting their crops on fire and to form arrows to point to Seattle to guide Japanese bombers. It was a fake story. It was a non-story. But it was used to whip up hysteria that led to FDR's, you know, speaking of FDR, I mean, this is arguably one of the things that he did that was terrible, to round up Japanese Americans, American citizens, and put them in internment camps. And Li Fang writes, tweets, the media played a big role in internment, reported fake stories about Japanese farmers drawing arrows and crops toward U.S. military bases. And then he has a picture of that New York Times story. Meanwhile, over at the Center for American Progress's blog, Think Progress, Kira Lerner, who has been on this program, political reporter there, the headline pretty much says it all. Citing Trump's voter fraud lie, states are working to make it harder to vote. And this is pretty shocking. Already at least 21 states across the country are capitalizing on political rhetoric about voter fraud to push for laws that make it harder for eligible citizens to vote. At the annual gathering of secretaries of state in Washington, D.C. this week, Republican elections chiefs blocked an attempt to officially denounce Trump's lie. Instead, they cited the president's claim, telling Think Progress they support measures like voter ID laws, cuts to same-day registration, and efforts to make it harder to register to vote. Alabama's Republican Secretary of State repeated the White House's unsubstantiated claim that thousands of out-of-state citizens cast ballots in New Hampshire, potentially handing that state to Hillary Clinton. And, you know, it goes on and on. There is no such thing in any consequential way. Maybe 20, 30 people a year who are not eligible to vote in the entire country vote. There is no such thing for all practical purposes as voter fraud. Well, there is election fraud, though, and it's being run by the Republican Party. Dave in Radcliffe, Kentucky, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Hey, not too much, Tom. It's such a timely question you asked because actually I've been thinking about it all weekend.
Can democracy survive Trump, you mean?
You know, about the, is America strong enough or the institution strong enough to avoid some sort of autocratic power grab?
Right.
And there's so many important news events over the weekend that firmed it up in my mind. I'm like 99% sure we are not. And the only one I really want to mention is the interview with the Russian pro-Kremlin pundit that Fareed Zakaria had on. He pretty much confirmed, in my mind, that Trump is under the influence of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, and he is. They've met their first objective. Their first objective is to sow doubt in Western liberalism.
Yeah.
What they're saying basically is,
Dave, we don't need Russia to do that. All you need to do is look at, what the Supreme Court opened that door. All you need to do is look at what the Koch network, for example, is doing.
Yes, and let me just say also that you're right. But here's why Russia's important and China is important in this. They can prove it. You don't have to govern through social justice. You can govern through traditional norms and mores, all right? And that's what right now the conservatives in America prefer. And you can govern that way effectively. You can still give the citizenry what they want. I mean, trust me, Russia has enough oil to last for eternity, maybe. Who knows? And the bottom line is right now in America, the conservatives, the traditional guardians of Western liberalism, have no interest in it. Instead they want social norms and mores enforced, and the yoke has been placed on the political left in America, and that scares me because that's not the political left's traditional role in the United States. And I know with Trump supporters, I've been debating him for a couple years now. Here's what works. If you say, look, World War III might happen under Trump, that has no effect. That has zero effect, even though it might be true. What has effect is if you say, if we get into any war that involves regime change, there's almost certainly going to be a draft. See, that affects them personally.
Yeah, right? It would. It would. Dave, I need to move along, but thank you for the call. I get it. John in Gilbert, Arizona. Hey, John, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I'll take my answer off the air, but I just want to say thanks for everything that you do for us, and thank you for teaching us on this President's Day. I got two questions for you. My one question is, why are there no laws to protect laws? That's one question. And my second question is, I don't understand, again, on why this orange dictator, Trump, no laws apply to him. This guy made a false accusation about Sweden. Please explain to all of us on how is that any different than if I hearsay somebody and then I decide to call my local airport and make a bomb threat?
Oh, it's a huge difference. It's not illegal to slander Sweden. It is illegal to phone in bomb threats. I mean, that's just very, very simple. But John, if your point is that it seems like the law doesn't apply to Donald Trump, yeah, it does seem that way. And I remember back in the 70s, it seemed that the laws didn't apply to Richard Nixon, and they caught up with him. It certainly seemed that the laws didn't apply to George W. Bush, and he actually got away with it. But I think that his reputation has been so damaged that history is going to treat him very badly, as are voters. He did a lot of damage to the Republican Party. So, we're just almost 4 weeks into the Trump presidency, and this is not a plea to give Trump some time. It's like, but there is stuff, apropos of the last guy who was calling, saying, well, what about Russian info? We need to investigate these things. We need to look into these things. But, I'm frankly far more concerned about billionaire influence over our government. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts right after this. And welcome back. Gregory, watching Free Speech TV in Lackawaxen, Pennsylvania. Am I saying it right, Gregory?
No, not really. I'm actually living in a little village in Beach Lake.
Oh, okay.
The area code's kind of a little wider than normal.
I see. So what's up?
Well, what's up is just like you said. I mean, and happy President's Day, and you talk about FDR, which was a good man, and being a traitor to his class of millionaires, which is what we're getting inundated with in Trump's cabinet. We're going from I cannot tell if I was a president to all you do is tell lies. And back to your whole things too. It's Trump saying fake news. Fox News is the most advantageous one of fake news that there is, and if there was some way to take that news conference off the air, it'd be great, man. And like you said, it's not informing anybody; it's misinforming. And back to you, like you're saying too.
I think they should just take the word news out of their name.
People that thinks that he's being denounced because the news is treating him badly actually support the people that are behind him, which is absurd.
Yeah, I think Fox just needs to take the word news out of their name. It's a pretend news. It's a fake news network. I mean, it's
dump in the street and pollute freely, and like I said, I think I read an article where they want to do away with the DNC anyway. Now, what, the 2018 or something?
Say what?
They want to do away with the regulations of the
the FCC, you mean, or the EPA?
Yeah, correct.
The EPA, yeah. They actually, yes, a member of Congress has introduced legislation to the House of Representatives to end the EPA at the end of 2018. On December 31st.
Who's your choice? Who do you think would be good for the DNC for the Democrats? I wrote a letter in and told somebody that Jon Stewart.
Keith Ellison will do spectacularly. Keith Ellison has a long history of organizing. He knows how to make things happen. He knows how to bring people together. He wins elections easily. He has said he will step down from his seat in the House of Representatives to be a full-time leader of the DNC, which is an amazing thing. I mean, to give up, that seat and that job and everything else to run the DNC, that's a huge sacrifice. And, Tom Perez, in my opinion, is a good man and has progressive leanings, but he's only won one election in his whole life, and it was the city council, as I recall, and has never, to the best of my knowledge, organized anything. I mean, he did a great job running the Department of Labor, and he's been on the show a couple times. I'm not going to, pick on him. But it seems to me that Keith Ellison is a much more well-qualified and experienced candidate to run the DNC. But we'll see. I mean, it's not my choice to make. It's up to the.
Yeah, Exactly. But
It's up to the party.
You know, people forget history, and which is so ironic that, you know, if you read history, and it's like I tell everybody, a lot of people I get and talk to us, is if you read the history of the biography of every president and see where they've gone and done, and, you know, nobody's perfect and no one hasn't lied, which is understandable. But don't think it's this guy just blatantly, I mean, you know, it just goes off the wall. I mean, if you read history, like FDR sits there and said, you know, like Hoover denied it and Coolidge denied it. They got all these billionaires into politics, and they just drove the country down. What's that? The beat down economy. You know, they want to do away with labor. They want to do away with unions. Or the only people that stand up and try to give people better wages and some benefits. I mean, I don't see what the problem is with that or why it's wrong, but they seem to be against that. You know,
the problem, Gregory, is
profit.
The problem is that it took the Great Depression to wake the American people up. And we haven't had anything like that since then. And what we've seen is this constant whittling away of the New Deal and Great Society programs that came out of, you know, FDR and his response to the Great Depression, which successfully pulled us out of the Great Depression. And I frankly think it's going to take another Great Depression, another Republican Great Depression to do it. And in fact, I'll talk about that right after the break. Thanks for the call, Gregory. No? It's that time? It is time for our Pigeon Alert.
Look, up in the sky.
It's a bird. No, it's a plane.
We are autonomous robotic organisms from the planet Z.
Ah, yes, that's the pigeons. That's what they are. They're actually, you know, robots from outer space who have come to spy on us. There's a story in the Gothamist.com. A man with huge net seen snatching pigeons off city streets. This is in Manhattan. You know, what's this guy doing? He's snatching these pigeons. You know, where's he taking them? Well, he's figured out that they're robotic spies who are here to spy on us. You know, this is why you never see dead pigeons or baby pigeons. And it's New York. They've probably been spying on Donald Trump at Trump Tower. And so he's snatching them up. He's going to play back the little tapes that they've got inside them before the mothership can take them up and find out what's really going on. Right. Okay. It's David in San Francisco. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. You know, a couple of different things. I'd lean on this. I'm glad you're raising the issue of organized crime with Trump. Because your original question had to do with whether or not Wall Street or the fat cats are going to be able to compete against him. I don't know if you've ever read any of those old Meyer Lansky books about organized crime, but
Meyer Lansky was organized crime.
Well, yeah, but he was the financier for most of the big families.
Right.
And if you read, for example, the biographies that came out about J. Edgar Hoover back in the early 90s, talks about how Meyer Lansky was in the 40s and 50s. He was buying as much as 2.5% of Wall Street per year. And if you just think about that in terms of 10 years' time, he would have had 25% of Wall Street. And then in 20 years' time, he would have had 50% of Wall Street, starting in the 50s. So by the 60s, 70s, 80s, Wall Street was dominated by organized crime money. And so your question about whether or not they're going to be able to compete against him, if Donald Trump is organized crime and organized crime runs Wall Street, it's all a pattern. And so every executive action that he does is going to be toward the income streams of organized crime. And in fact, the other day I noticed Tillerson, the new Secretary of State, has tried to fire a massive number of people in the State Department. And one of the, if you think about the executive order sealing up the borders, well, if organized crime can get you a dirty passport, and Tillerson, as Secretary of State, can shut down the tracking of honest passports, I'm wondering whether Tillerson is intentionally trying to screw up the tracking system for honest passports.
No, David, you're wandering into Alex Jones territory. The mafia, the Italian mafia that grew out of the 1890s, out of that wave of immigration, the Sicilian mob, the mafia, and rose up to extraordinary power in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s as a result of blackmailing, as a result of Santos Trafficani and Carlos Marcello explicitly blackmailing J. Edgar Hoover and Clyde Tolson about their sexual relationship and being gay and all that kind of stuff, and inviting Hoover twice a year down to Hialeah, to the racetrack, and plying him with young boys and money and stuff like that. I mean, all that is gone by and large. David, thank you for the call. That is gone by and large, and has been replaced, it seems. I mean, I'm sure there's still remnants of the mob echoing around, and in fact, I mean, there's allegations that Donald Trump was built one of his buildings out of cement instead of steel because mob guys in New York were like, we'll make a deal with you, buddy, or something like that. But, who knows? But frankly, I'm more concerned about what Franklin Roosevelt called organized money. And one of the clip that I played opening the show was, FDR saying government by organized money is more dangerous than government by organized mob. And it's true. And that's the thing that I think, frankly, we have to be very, very concerned about. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, it's kind of a simple question, but, what attracts people to billionaires as, most of us are either middle class or lower class. And so, why do people trust billionaires? They would be the last people for me to trust with anything.
I think there's an instinct built into our culture, and I'm guessing that this came along with agriculture in the kind of Daniel Quinn sense, or Peter Farb sense. I'm rereading his book Humankind, which he died, I think, in 1980, so it's been a while since it was in print, but I found a used copy the other day. And that we celebrate kings and queens, that we celebrate and for a long time, and popes and things like that, and the hierarchy, and this kind of Calvinist worldview that you and I have talked about before, John, that if somebody is rich, they must be preferred by God. And it's such a deep strain in the DNA of Western society, Western civilization, that when the founders started this country, they not only were unable to extract it, to excise it from our cultural DNA, but you had Alexander Hamilton in the second day of the Constitutional Convention stand up and say that the president should be elected for life and should be referred to as His Highness. And he was so hooted. I mean, they laughed at him. He was so humiliated and offended by that he left the Constitutional Convention and didn't come back for weeks, went back to New York to lick his wounds. He was very angry about that. But he was reflecting. I mean, that's just like, that's there. So our modern kings and queens are the billionaires, the Betsy DeVosses and the Rex Tillersons. He's a multimillionaire, not a billionaire, but close enough. And I think that's just, it's part of our wiring, John.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be nice if we sought solidarity amongst ourselves, and I think that's what progressivism is attempting to do. But it is
we do that when we get an evil king, right? And that's that was Herbert Hoover in 1929. He crashed the economy, and it may turn out to be Donald Trump. I absolutely believe that Donald Trump is going to produce a reaction, an abreaction that is so strong that it will tear things down. And I've got to tell you guys about, and John, thanks a lot for the call. I got to tell you, we'll get into this in the next hour, about the coming crash and what conservatives are concerned about.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction. This is from chapter 4. It's titled The Clathrate Gun. The deepest place on Earth, the deepest part of our oceans, is a massive canyon in the West Pacific called the Mariana Trench. More than 35,000 feet deep, the pressure of the water is 1,000 times that of the surface of the ocean. At that depth, a normal submarine would collapse like a paper bag. There's very little life there, and what does live is adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness like nowhere else on Earth. The first man to dive solo to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was filmmaker James Cameron. A lay expert on the oceans, in part from his work making the movie Titanic, Cameron designed, funded, built, and in 2012 navigated his own submarine, the Deep Sea Challenger, into these icy depths. To say that James Cameron understands the ocean in a way that few other human beings ever could would be an understatement. From shallow dives to the deepest place on Earth, he knows the seas, and he knows about their methane clathrates. As he told me earlier this year, quote, "The bottom line is that given the number of species expected to die off in the next century just due to climate change and the other effects of our industrial civilization, we are already in the middle of a mass extinction event equivalent to the lesser ones in paleo history, such as the KT extinction that took out the dinosaurs. So the Homo sapien isn't a species that's currently endangered. However, the clathrate gun scenario, James Cameron said, changes that. It doubles down on an already bad situation, putting us on the hit list as well. Not literally, because some people probably will survive in highly artificial environments, meaning the species will perish, but the vast majority of humanity will perish." Cameron added, with a metaphor worthy of his brilliant Avatar movies, "We're talking about the survival of our kids. We collectively are playing Russian roulette. We're putting a gun to their heads and going click, 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 a clathrate gun." Only discovered in the serious way in the 1960s, there is so much methane in the form of clathrates, such as the frozen methane slurry on the floor of the continental shelves around the oceans of the world, that it's at least double all the known underground coal, oil, and gas on the entire planet. Peter Ward, the paleontologist at the University of Bristol, told me, quote, "Methane is way worse than carbon dioxide. It's inert right now in the soil. It's not affecting anyone in any way. When you warm it, though, it becomes a gas, and then it starts acting immediately as a greenhouse gas. So this is an immediate and very short-term threat to human civilization." For the last decade, a joint U.S.-Russia research team out of the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, has been exploring the East Siberian Sea, Arctic. They are looking at the bottom of the seafloor where once stable reserves of frozen methane have begun thawing and bubbling up into the atmosphere. Dr. Igor Semeletov told the research team in 2011. He told the British newspaper, The Independent, about what he found that year and the scope of the impending methane problem. Quote, "Earlier, we found torch-like structures like this, but they were only tens of meters in diameter. This is the first time that we found continuous, powerful, and impressive seeping structures more than 1,000 meters in diameter. It's amazing," end of quote. Amazing academically, that is. Horrifying for those of us who call planet Earth home. 1,000 meters is a kilometer, so this is one massive single methane leak, and it's a bit more than a half mile in diameter. And it is just one of many. Dr. Smeletov added, quote,
I was most impressed by the sheer scale and high density of the plumes. Over a relatively small area, we found more than 100, but over a wider area, there should be thousands of them, end quote. Those sites would have been familiar during the Permian and other extinctions as well. As Paul Wignall explained to me, the significant thing about methane is it's a very effective greenhouse gas, so it causes global warming. Once you trigger warming, if you release methane, it's in positive feedback. It gets warmer and warmer as you release more methane into the atmosphere. So we think of this as a big part of the Permian extinction at that time. This is very rapid warming. Charles Dickens, who had proposed the methane link to the Permian mass extinction, told me, "We know that in the bottom of the seafloor, large parts of the ocean margins have methane in a solid phase. And what happens when you change the temperature, it can melt this frozen methane phase." He added, "The idea is that during some of these extinction events, we have some triggering that forces the ocean temperatures to warm, and then that melts the solid methane phase, which turns into gas and goes into the oceans and atmosphere." Paleontologist Michael Benton concluded, quote, "The risk is runaway greenhouse, which is when the self-correcting mechanisms cease to kick in, and you heat by a little bit and you release methane. That then causes excess heating and you release more methane, and so it goes on. It's believed at the end of the Permian 250 million years ago, this kind of runaway greenhouse gas exacerbated the effect, making it, the Permian mass extinction, an awful lot worse. By 2010, it was said that 8 million tons of methane emissions were being released into the atmosphere every year, but researchers believe that too is an underestimate. More recent studies have shown a far more rapid increase in methane, CH4 concentration in the atmospheres. In the last 2 centuries, the amount of methane in the atmosphere has increased from 0.7 ppm to 1.7 ppm. That's the largest known increase in the history of the planet. The book, The Last Hours of Humanity.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. You know, we had a conversation, by the way, last week. I often tell you, just because something's on the internet doesn't make it true. Also, just because somebody called into this program and said something doesn't make it true. And I blew it with regard to my own rule. Last week, somebody called in and was talking about I believe it was the vote to confirm Tom Price as head of the EPA. And that person said that Claire McCaskill had voted for him. And I said, oh, that's terrible. You know, Claire McCaskill, blah, blah, blah. And I shouldn't have. I mean, that was just like, I should have checked my facts. Claire McCaskill did not vote for Tom Price. And so I wanted to apologize to Claire McCaskill and to you for the possibility that you might have gotten some fake news on this program, because I'm very committed to not having fake news here, to being a reliable news source. And even if it's my callers. And, so. Now, I mentioned the Great Recession, the Great Depression, the crash, the easing, whatever that might be coming. We talked about this last week, actually. Somebody had called in and said, your book, The Crash of 2016, it's now 2017. Is that crash still going to happen? What's going on? And my point was, yeah, the fundamentals of the economy still suck. We're basically still in 2008. The difference is that the Fed has flooded the market, and this is happening from central banks all over the world, by the way, has flooded the market with free money. And that's what's keeping everything afloat. And you can't do that forever. You can't even do that for probably more than a decade. And it's been going on for 8 years now. And there's never been, to the best of my knowledge, an expansion in our economy and in our stock market and our housing markets that's lasted more than, at the most, 9 or 10 years. And typically, they go in 5 or 6 year cycles. So here we are 8 years into an expansion. Or nearly 8 years into an expansion. And so whether it's going to be a small downturn, a stock market correction, it'll lose a couple thousand points, or whether it's going to be a big correction and turn into something terrible, is going to depend in no small part on how the Fed responds to it and how the Trump administration responds to it. And I have no confidence in the Trump administration's ability to respond to anything meaningful. And since they, are so committed to sucking up to billionaires in the interests of transnational corporations over the American people and the interest of banksters, I mean, just Goldman Sachs alone has 7 people, I believe, in Trump's inner circle and on his and in his cabinet. So, I mean, it's our first billionaire president. It's our first billionaire cabinet. And so, expect problems. So over at the economiccollapseblog.com, which is, a right-wing, oh, my God, the sky is falling site that agrees with me on some of these things. They're talking about a new recession is coming and Donald Trump needs it to begin sooner rather than later. So this is fascinating, this concern about, a new crash and all this kind of stuff. But I'm going to come back to this in just a minute because we got Wendell Potter on the line with us. He's a former health insurance industry executive, the author of Deadly Spin and Nation on the Take. His latest project is tarbell.org, tarbell.org. It's an independent nonprofit digital newsroom showing how money and politics impacts millions of Americans. His website, Wendell with 2 L's, Potter.com. You can tweet him at wendellpotter.com. And Wendell, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Tom. Glad to be back.
Great to have you with us. I understand that California is taking possibly a serious shot at single payer. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right. We've got a bill that was introduced in both the Assembly and the Senate on Friday that would create a single payer system in California. This is really, really big news. It's a very important milestone, and I think we're going to find it's going to have a lot of support.
So how will it work? And, what are the provisions of the bill?
The bill itself at this point is there just isn't a lot of language there, but it just it's kind of it would provide the framework or would authorize the state to move forward to develop a single-payer plan. So that's much work obviously has to be done, but it is the first bill that's been introduced in the California legislature in some time. As you may remember, the California legislature has actually passed a single-payer bill twice back during the years when Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, that's right. He vetoed them, didn't he?
He vetoed both, and so we're now seeing that with a governor who's a Democrat. And Democrats having a supermajority in the legislature, this very well could go through.
That's amazing. Schwarzenegger could have been the Tommy Douglas of the United States.
That's exactly right.
If he had just signed.
We're going to find that there's a lot of business support this time around. There's an organization that's coming together called the Business Leaders Transforming Healthcare that's being put together by business leaders under the auspices of the American Sustainable Business Council. And in fact, a businessman who I have gotten to know who produced a documentary called Fix It Healthcare is leading that effort. And that's another documentary I would hope that your listeners and viewers would take a look at. Go to fixithealthcare.org and you'll be able to see it.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. So what can, forgive me, Wendell, just inhaled some water. What can people who are, presumably anybody who's in California, what they can do is, call their assembly or member or their senator and say, hey, please support this. What can people who are outside California do? Or is this something where we just have to kind of stand back and let's see what happens in the Golden State?
Well, I think it would be great for Californians certainly to contact their legislator. In fact, I think it'd be great for them to contact the authors of the bill. It's Senator Ricardo Lara, L-A-R-A, is the Senate sponsor, and
Assemblyman.
It's co-authored, by the way, by Senator Tony Atkins, San Diego. So I would most definitely reach out to them. But yes, they should reach out to their legislators, and those of us who live in the rest of the country. I think it'd be useful to reach out to the Physicians for National Health Care, which is a national organization.
That's PNHC.org.
Yeah, exactly. And Healthcare Now is very much an operating organization in California, and so there are a number of organizations that are active. But at the national level, Physicians for National Healthcare and Healthcare Now.
I'm guessing National
are,
Nurses United are big on this too?
Sorry, say that again.
I'm guessing National Nurses United are big on this too, the
Exactly.
Nurses
National
Union?
Nurses United is a big single-payer advocate, has been for many years, and they are based in California as well, too, in the Bay Area.
Yeah, this is amazing. What, California is the sixth or seventh largest economy in the world. Certainly they won't have the problem that Vermont had of not having enough, even though Vermont passed a single-payer program, that with only 600,000 people in the state, they weren't able to generate the critical mass necessary to do a real insurance program that could protect everybody. California should be able to easily do that, but that's going to mean that the 5 or 6 big companies, and you can let me know how many still exist now, big health insurance companies, are going to lose tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And I'm guessing that they will, at the very least, pour hundreds of millions of dollars into fighting this thing, won't they?
There's no doubt that's true. I should say that when the legislature passed those 2 bills during the Schwarzenegger years, the industry didn't pour a lot of money into it because they felt pretty certain that Schwarzenegger would veto it, and he did. They could count on him. This time around, it's a different ballgame. So I suspect you'll see that they will be beginning to pour a lot of money into California to defeat it. Now, this is legislation, though. It's not a ballot initiative. We saw a ballot initiative in Colorado be defeated last year. And the reason for that was because the industry poured millions of dollars into Colorado to defeat it. So ballot initiatives are not so easy to pass because of the ability of industry to just inundate a state with money. The legislature is a different creature. So even if they spend a lot of money, there's a good chance that this could really keep moving forward.
Yeah. How long do you think it'll take?
I think chances are it may not get through the legislature this year. We'll have to see. I know some of the candidates who are running to succeed Brown are also single-payer supporters. So if it doesn't get through this year, I think it could next. Now, one of the things that I think is behind this is what's happening in Washington, and who knows what's going to happen to the Affordable Care Act now that the Republicans rule that town. It's very uncertain, and that's creating a lot of uncertainty in California. And the folks out there really want to try to get ahead of the game and be ready with legislation because very, very likely the bottom's going to fall out of the healthcare system pretty soon, depending on what the Republicans do.
Yeah, and that's going to create a real sense of urgency out there. That's fascinating. Wendell Potter, tarbell.org, the website, wendellpotter.com as well, and you can tweet him at Wendell Potter, WendellPotter.com. And Wendell, thank you so much.
Anytime, Tom. Thank you.
Great news. Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, my thoughts, and all that kind of stuff right after this. And welcome back. Carol in Ben Lomond, California. Hey, Carol. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
I'll take my response off the air.
Okay.
Tom, I am an old hippie, and I experimented with more drugs than I care to remember. I'm thinking, couldn't we solve this whole thing with a piss test? Surely it requires more sobriety to steer the ship of state than it does to drive the Q-13 bus.
You want a drug test, Donald Trump? Is that what you're saying, Carol?
Hmm?
I would do the opposite. I think Donald Trump needs to get high. I'm serious. I mean,
okay.
Taking psychedelics, when I was a teenager, completely changed my worldview for the whole rest of my life. I mean, I suddenly understood that reality was not as solid as I thought it was, and that I should be questioning everything all the time. And you look at the studies on people who take psychedelics in an appropriate setting, in a therapeutic setting or in a spiritual setting, and it has a very, very positive transformational influence on them. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody should run out and take psychedelics. They're illegal, number one, and number two, if you don't do it with the appropriate set and setting, it can be a disaster, a psychological disaster, an emotional disaster, a spiritual disaster. But done right, or at the very least, smoke some pot. Come on, Donald. It's like, I think he needs to get outside his own head. This is the problem with Mormons and teetotalers. And Donald Trump is a teetotaler. He doesn't even drink coffee. He's apparently his brother melted down from alcoholism and died. And he just didn't want to go down that road. Or maybe he had his own struggle with drugs and alcohol when he was young that we don't know about. I don't know what led to this. But it was the same problem with George W. Bush. He was just like he was on this binge of no alcohol ever, and it's like, man, he needed to smoke some dope and watch the news. I mean, it just changes your perspective.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
So yeah, instead of drug testing him, I'd buy the stash for him if he would do it. Carol, thanks a lot for the call. Good talking with you. Summer in Plano, Texas. Hey, Summer, what's up?
Yes. Okay. So I'm concerned about the future of the Democratic Party. A dear friend of mine here in Texas, we had this conversation last week about the fact of, I said, oh gosh, Trump, he's insane. It's driving me crazy. And she said, oh, everybody hates Trump. But then she dropped this bomb on me, Tom. She said, in the last election, there was absolutely no way she could vote for the Democrat just because she didn't want higher taxes. So I guess my question is this. It ties into fake news and into marketing. I feel like people have just been brainwashed into thinking that Democrats equal higher taxes. How do we change that? And then, am I wrong in that? I feel like it's sort of a group thing.
No, you're not. You're not wrong in that. And number one, I would say we actually need higher taxes. Back when we had a top tax rate of 91%, we were able to put a man on the moon. We were able to build the interstate highway system. We were able to build brand new schools and hospitals all across this country. And since Reagan dropped that top tax rate from 74% down to 25% in the 80s, we haven't been able to do squat. I mean, our country's been falling apart ever since. And so it has to be fueled by taxes. But there's a piece about taxes. Summer, I'm going to go off on this when we come back from the break. So keep listening, and that I'll explain to you. But thank you very much for the call. We're hitting a break here, so I'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Okay, somebody had called about taxes during the break, and I just wanted to, I do this riff on the air here periodically. But it's been a while, I think, since I did it, and just in the interest of public education, and I should write this up and send it off to Alternate or The Guardian or something. But here's how taxes work. People say, oh, I don't want to vote for Democrats because they're going to raise my taxes, so I'm going to vote for Republicans. Well, that's a very reasonable position to take if your income is over, say, $300,000 a year. And your wealth is, and you're a multimillionaire. because Republicans will cut your taxes. And for somebody who is very, very wealthy, typically, not always, but a large percentage of the time, people who have an income of $1 million a year, $2 million a year, $5 million a year. In the case of the Wall Street guys, literally $1 billion a year. Those folks control their own salary. Most CEOs actually have a fairly large degree of control over their own salary. So, because they've got a what's called a compensation committee made up of other CEOs, and they're all buddies, and it's an old boy network. And this is the reason why CEOs make hundreds to thousands of times what workers make now, versus prior to the 1980s, prior to Reagan, the average CEO made 30 times what their average worker did. Why? Because there was this top tax bracket of 91% after you made about $1 million a year. And so in today's dollars. And so when people started, after the $1 million, the 91% kicked in and they said, hey, screw it. I'll live on $1 million a year. It's plenty. And so, but you cut their taxes, as Reagan did. He cut that top tax rate down to 25%, and suddenly they're making $10 million, $20 million, $50 million, $100 million a year and only paying 25% taxes on it. So cutting taxes works really well for millionaires and billionaires, but it's the exact opposite for working people. Working people should actually want their taxes to go up, because taxes fund the public services that are mostly used by working people. Number one. And number two, when taxes on working people go up, so do paychecks. And it's very simple. There's this thing called a labor market. There actually is supply and demand in labor. And so if, somebody's running a company and they've got, say you're running a tool and die shop and you own the tool and die shop. To use the example of, my dad, worked in a tool and die shop for 40 years. And there was a guy who owned it, in fact, he was the father of the wife of my business partner, Terry O'Connor. And he basically, decided how much money he was going to take out because he owned the company. But the individual workers, they knew that, okay, these guys will work for $25,000 a year. That's, take-home pay. And so they'd pay them, $30,000 a year, knowing that $5,000 was going to go to taxes, and they'd take home $25,000. So that was the market for a machinist back in the 50s and 60s. And that, by the way, you can, double or triple that and to translate it into today's dollars. But what they knew was, okay, people are only willing to do this work for $25,000 take-home pay. So what happens? And so you got to pay them $30,000, so they end up with $25,000. Well, what happens if their taxes double? Now that $30,000 is only giving them $20,000 in take-home pay. Well, they're not willing to work for that. That's not what the market will bear. So what happens is employers raise the pay to $35,000 a year. And this is why during the era that the taxes were going up, from 1913 when the income tax was introduced until 1980 when Reagan came along, as taxes on working people were going up, wages were going up too, really fast. And it's also why when Reagan cut the top tax rate and cut the lower tax rates as well, he reduced taxes on working people, at least for a while, that wages started going down. Because now it's like, oh, hey, I'm paying the guy $35,000. He's taking home, $25,000. But now taxes have gone down. He's now taking home $30,000. But I know he'll work for $25,000. So you cut the wages.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So the bottom line is the taxes are frankly irrelevant for working people. They, cutting taxes, raising taxes only really hits people at the top end of the tax bracket. Been very little discussion of Native Americans. And Native Americans are not only, a minority in North America right now, but they were the original people here. We stole this country from them. We being white Europeans stole this country from Native Americans. And in the process of stealing the country, we slaughtered, we robbed, we raped, we pillaged. The devastation in the name of God and manifest destiny and just plain old theft and greed of tribe after tribe after tribe across this country
One of the really amazing things to do when you come to Washington, D.C. to visit this beautiful city, the District of the Goddess, is to go to the Native American Museum. And you will get it. This country was fully occupied. Fully occupied. Coast to coast, top to bottom. There wasn't a spot, a habitable spot anyway, where you didn't have Native American communities. Now, they might have had in the more hostile areas, like the desert of Nevada, you had the Shoshone, where your population density was, 100 people per square mile. Whereas in what's now New Orleans, you had, a city, right? The mound builders in the southeast, very fancy, large, sophisticated cities. So we had, there's extraordinary diversity in Native American communities across the United States, but they were stable, they were solid, they'd been here for 10 to 23,000 years. And we made every attempt to destroy their culture, to outlaw their languages, to murder them, to poison them, to give them infected blankets with smallpox. We killed off millions of them with influenza and syphilis and diseases that we brought with us from Europe. And now there is a Lakota prophecy that is being fulfilled that is scaring the living bejesus out of Lakota people in South Dakota. And I don't know if you saw this story in The Guardian. I've been reading The Guardian more and more as opposed to other newspapers, because it just does such a great job of both covering American news. They have a very, in fact, more The Guardian's a British-owned newspaper, but more Americans read The Guardian than Brits. It's one of many newspapers in Britain. It's one of the only in the United States, I think, that actually is not somebody's mouthpiece, And they have this extraordinary story at theguardian.com titled, "We Are the Protectors, Not Protesters. Why I'm Fighting the North Dakota Pipeline." And I just wanted to share with you some of this. This is from Hyuskin American Horse is his name. He lives in Cannonball, North Dakota. And here's what he has to say. This is important stuff. Our elders have told us that if the Zuzeska sape, also known as the black snake, comes across our land, our world will end. Zuzeska has come in the form of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and so I must fight it. I am Sikangu Ogallala Lakota, born in Rosebud, South Dakota, and writing from the front line of the movement against the pipeline in Cannonball. I have been holding this ground with my Standing Rock Sioux tribe relatives since the spring. I am defending the land and water of my people as my ancestors did before me. The $3.8 billion pipeline project is proposed to carry approximately 470,000 barrels a day of fracked oil from the Bakken oil fields, 1,172 miles through the country's heartland to Illinois. The pipeline will cross the confluence of the Cannonball and Missouri rivers, where it threatens to contaminate our primary source of drinking water and damage the bordering indigenous burial grounds, historic villages, and Sundance sites that surround the area in all directions. Those sites that were not desecrated when the area was flooded in 1948 by the construction of the Ojai Dam are now in danger again. This week, writes Hyuskin American Horse in The Guardian, and I strongly recommend you check this article out. This week, I have witnessed pipeline construction tear its way toward the water of the Missouri River, which flow into the Mississippi, threatening to pollute the aquifer that carries drinking water to 10 million people. I have seen where their machines clawed through the earth that once held my relatives' villages. I have watched law enforcement officials protect the oil industry by dragging away my indigenous brothers and sisters who stood up for our people. The fact that Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the pipeline, would use the word Dakota, which in our language means friend or ally, in the name of its project is disrespectful.
This pipeline is a direct threat to all Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people, especially our future generations. And we are not the only ones. We know that burning this oil is changing our climate, and indigenous people all over the world are bearing the brunt of the catastrophes that it causes.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And happy President's Day. Marty in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, love the show. You were talking about FDR, and, I hear all this talk about immigration, but this is really nothing new. I mean, you go back, especially when it comes to Mexicans and Mexican Americans, you go back to the Mexican repatriation of 1929 through 1936, I believe. Then there was Operation Wetback in the 50s. And I guess the point is that it was always led by Republicans. It was always initiated by Republicans. And, myself as a Mexican American, a veteran of the U.S. Army, a college graduate, I just, I find myself just, utterly just disgusted with what's going on. And it's, for people to think this is something new, especially the Trump supporters, this has been going on for over a century. And, what they really ought to say is this is really an anti-Mexican campaign, because it always seems historically when Republicans are trying to rile people up, they always want to, and they won't say it, but it's always geared towards Mexicans.
Yeah, I'm guessing, I don't know if he's doing it this year, but in previous years, Donald Trump has been importing European immigrants to work at Mar-a-Lago because it's so fashionable to have somebody with a European accent serving you as your waiter. And so, white Europeans, no problem. Mexicans, oh my God. And that seems to be a common thread through pretty much everything he's doing.
Yeah, and what people don't understand is I always tell people in the Southwest is that Mexico and the United States are historically intertwined very uniquely. They have a very unique history, especially if you're brought up in the Southwest.
Yeah, which used to be Mexico, by the way.
You don't understand. Maybe you don't understand because you're not part of this region, but it is, it's amazing that here we are 100 years and we're still talking about similar topics. It's just...
Yeah, it's
disgusting.
And in New Mexico, Arizona, and Southern California all used to be part of Mexico. I mean, that was Polk's War. That was the Mexican-American War. In fact, Abraham Lincoln wrote eloquently against that, against President Polk. So, but yeah, I agree. And I would say that it's not just the nationality, that there is a large race component here. Coming out of the Republican Party, and has been for a long, long time. And this whole, white victimhood, white grievance thing is, it sells well in poor white America. And it's unfortunate that there are always demagogues who will, in the Republican Party, who will exploit that kind of racism, that kind of friendly fascism to promote it. Marty, thanks for... Go ahead.
I tell my people in the South, my friends, I said, next time you put on your cowboy boots and your cowboy hats, look up and just kind of look up at where all that came from, where that originated from, and be proud of that. But
yeah, there you go. Marty, thanks for the call. Andy in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, there was a question that came up earlier on your show about whether the United States can survive the Trump presidency.
Yeah, whether our institutions are strong enough to prevent us from flipping into something like fascism.
Okay, well, in my opinion, democracy cannot survive in this country. Number one, the people that vote for Trump and other Republicans really don't do the due diligence. They won't look at a congressional candidate and determine how he votes. It's to see if he votes in their favor.
Right.
They'll just listen to his rhetoric and vote based on that. It's kind of like listening to Rush Limbaugh. I don't know how many times I've heard Rush Limbaugh tell one of his biggest lies, and that is when he says, "I don't lie."
Right. It's there's a reason why Republicans from the great crash of 1929 until the second or fourth year of the Clinton administration. Only for a 2-year period during Harry Truman's presidency did the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives. There's a reason why that happened and why it was so hard to get for Republicans to get elected president, that Richard Nixon had to commit treason in order to make it happen. And that was that we used to have a news media in the United States that actually informed people about what the Republican positions were. And, and in fact, we used to honestly debate it. I mean, I remember sitting with my dad watching William F. Buckley on TV, and Buckley would just come right out and say things like, we really, there should be essentially a ruling class in this country. Wealthy, well-educated people should be making the decisions because they know how to use the levers of power and how to make the country great and all this, which is the mythology of, that put a billionaire in the White House. But since Reagan, blew up the Fairness Doctrine in '86 or '87, and then, with the Telecommunications Act and a death of 1,000 paper cuts, a whole series of deregulations by the FCC in the middle that did away with ownership rules, we now have a media that used to be owned by, thousands and thousands of locally owned businesses and families, and is now owned, the electronic media anyway, our radio and television media, is now owned by 6 companies, basically. And now with the internet, and so the internet is kind of the last place where you can actually find information. And now you got Ajit Pai in charge of the FCC, and he wants to blow up net neutrality. So the internet is going to go the way of cable TV. And, you're going to have to pay extra for all these kinds of things, and some lanes will be slower and some will be fast. In other words, the internet is no longer going to be, the wide open space where you can find anything. And this has enabled this lack of knowledge on the part of the people of the United States, because we have gone from a news model in news to an infotainment model in news. That has enabled Republicans to get away with lying to the American people for 40 years now. And they're continuing to. And you're seeing the big lie. I mean, Trump talking about voter fraud, for example. And now you've got 21 states where Republicans are right now as we speak, cranking down, tightening the screws on who can vote and how they can vote and when they can vote and all this kind of thing in an effort to drive down the votes of young people, of older people, of poor people, of urban dwellers, people of color. So, yeah, it's very problematic, Andy. But I think that this is, I kind of started the show with, our Lügenpresse, the German word for lying press, which is what Trump is saying basically with fake news, that we actually do have a problem of a Lügenpresse, but it's not the problem that Trump is identifying. We need, Americans need to be informed, and our press is not doing a good job of it. You're absolutely right. Andy, thanks for the call. Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom. This dovetails with what I want to talk about. Excuse me. And it's Trump. And, I've been looking at some of the old tapes of the press conferences that JFK used to have. He used to have a press conference once every 2 weeks, I think for a total of 61 during his brief presidency. And if you want to see how a classy intellectual politician handles the press, you look at these JFK press conferences. He was not afraid to take on any question from anywhere. He disarmed the press. He was funny. He was articulate, and he was not afraid of criticism. I mean, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis, he went out and said, "You know what? I'm the executive officer of the government. The buck stops here." To paraphrase,
same with the Bay of Pigs, which had been set up by the CIA, and he inherited from Richard Nixon. It was going to be Nixon's October surprise in 1960. Nixon put that thing together in early 1960, and the weather prevented it from happening. But the invasion of Cuba, which Nixon thought was going to get him elected, but Kennedy took the election, and Kennedy owned it. You're right.
And you're right. He owned it. He didn't sit there and blame and whine about the previous administration like Trump is doing about Obama.
Right.
He owned it. He says, "Look, I'm the guy. I own up." But it's really depressing to see how far we've fallen in discourse in this country in over 50 years, I guess now. You look back and we were much more intellectual and classy back then than we are now.
Yeah. Well, there's also a very consequential difference between Donald Trump, who was born to great wealth, and Jack Kennedy, who was born to great wealth. And Jack Kennedy's family, and you know, I know this from having written about them, but also knowing some of the Kennedys. Jack Kennedy's family, his father and his mother, Joe and Rose, you know, say what you want about Joe Kennedy and his connections to the, you know, organized crime and whatnot. They raised their kids to believe in the idea of public service. In the phrase is noblesse oblige, the obligation of nobility. In other words, you were born wealthy, and therefore you have an obligation to use that position and that prominence to serve your country, to serve the rest of society. And whereas Donald Trump was born into arguably probably a similar amount of wealth, maybe not quite as much, but you know, he was similarly wealthy. But his father was involved in, you know, KKK riots. He was you know, blocking black people out of his apartment buildings. And Donald Trump was involved with that, you know, early on, according to some of the news reports I've read. You know, I can't say that for an absolute certain fact, but certainly his father was. And, you know, charged with basically redlining or discriminatory housing. And so there was no sense of noblesse oblige. There was no sense of, you know, your wealth comes with an obligation. Instead, it was your wealth comes with an opportunity to grab whatever you want, whether it's a woman's genitals or whether it's somebody else's money who wants to go to a university, and you can say, oh, yeah, Trump University. So it's just a completely different mindset as a result of the way that both of these two rich guys grew up. And Mark, thanks for calling and making that point, because it's a really good illustration. And thanks for listening to Sirius XM, Mark. I appreciate it. We'll be back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News, find out what's going on in the world today. We'll be taking more of your calls. And I want to get back to my little rant here about the coming, shall we say, economic problems. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And why the Republicans want the crash to happen sooner rather than later. Fascinating. Stick around. And welcome back. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, you caught me by surprise, dude. Let me get you off speaker.
Thank you. But all right.
You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I was watching Amy Goodman just before your show. She comes on Link, and she's going to be on right after you.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember asking you a couple years ago, it's about a year and a half maybe, it's how long it's been since I called in, what would be the end of the line for you, or the last straw for you? And you told me at that point, if somebody like Mussolini or, you know, Trump got elected and started running the country stupid, you and Luis would move to Mexico.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not happening, Scott. I've reconsidered.
Here we are, and I'm asking you, how in the world are we going to get out of this? This can't be what the Trump people voted for.
No.
It can't be what this man is doing.
It's not, although he keeps telling them it is. You know, you need to get on his mailing list. Go to DonaldJTrump.com or whatever the website is and sign up for it. Because, for example, on Friday, he sent out an email that was point by point. Here's all the things that we've accomplished in this administration. And it's really quite remarkable how they're just, I mean, completely divorced from reality. You know, we saved the coal industry by doing away with Obama's, you know, streams rule. Well, they didn't save the coal industry.
But that's another thing, Tom. He's given back all these cancer-causing jobs that have killed people for generations.
But he's not even giving them back, Scott.
Well, I mean, he's letting them.
I mean, doing away with the streams rule.
And he's giving the fracking jobs out. Everything is going to kill us all. Yeah. And with one hand, and then the other hand, he's taking away health care, Medicaid, Medicare. And, I mean, you know, one little hand does one thing, and why you're not looking, his other little hand is turning the key to the cage, basically locking you in.
Yep.
You know? So,
my opinion, Scott, is that he has already overreached. He will continue to overreach. Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are going to overreach. It's what Republicans always do. It's what they did in the 20s. They're doing it again. And when they overreach, they will knock the pillars out that are holding the ceiling up, basically. And the ceiling is going to fall in on them. And when it does, the American people are going to go, whoa, that emperor has no clothes. And there will be a reaction. Right now, there's a reaction, quote, on the left, right? And it's quite obvious for anybody to see. But the broader reaction is going to be when Trump voters realize that they've been lied to, that they've been had. And it's going to take a shock for them to pay attention. It's going to take a shock for them to get out of the Fox News fog. And I put a lot of this at the feet of Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes and Fox So-Called News and right-wing hate radio. I mean, it's just, there's so much money being poured into these things. These guys are getting so wealthy off screwing our country.
It's out of control, man. It's
it is.
Bad.
It is, and that's kind of the good news, because when it's out of control, it tends, like cars out of control, tend to crash into things. And when this economy, when this country crashes into something, and God forbid it would be, like a war with China or a war with Iran, although those are possibilities given how unstable Trump is. But, when we crash into something, it's going to cause people to go, whoa, is the old Scooby-Doo, whoa? And at that point, I think that's going to be the end of the line for the Republican Party. So, and this isn't just wishful thinking. I mean, we're seeing it all around us right now. Scott, thanks for the call. Thanks. It's great to hear from you. A year and a half later. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Talk Media News has the day off. It's President's Day. I forgot. They take federal holidays. So, you got me, which is hopefully okay with you. What I wanted to share with you, I started this rant, and then we were trying to get Wendell Potter on the phone, and we finally got him on, so I kind of interrupted it. Interrupt us here. But the headline by Michael Snyder over at the economiccollapseblog.com is, this was posted on February 12th, last week, why Donald Trump needs the next recession to start as quickly as possible. And he says, new recession is coming, and Donald Trump needs it to begin sooner rather than later. As I explained last week, most American voters tend to care about their pocketbooks more than anything else. If the next recession were to officially start during the first quarter of 2017, it would be very easy for Trump to blame it on Obama. And then he could portray himself as the one that pulled the U.S. economy out of recession in time for the 2020 election. But if the next recession does not begin until 2018 or 2019, everybody's going to blame it on Trump, even if it's not his fault. In politics, who gets the blame for whatever goes wrong is often the most important thing. And if Trump wants to avoid blame for the next recession, he needs to start it as quickly as possible. So, they say, for most of 2016, the mainstream media was warning a new recession is probably coming. And, he gives links and things like that. So, yeah, and it is coming. I mean, like I said, expansions don't last forever. And I just, it's absolutely amazing that conservatives are now saying, Donald Trump, please start the recession. So you can get that, kind of wring the extra money out of the economy. Well, it's not going to be, in all probability, Trump who does it. It'll either be Republicans in the House and Senate, changing our tax code or blowing up Obamacare or some other, way consequentially flattening our economy, or it's going to be the Fed raising interest rates, which they're going to have to do. And raising interest rates cools down the economy. Cooling down the economy starts that downward spiral in the stock markets, and boom, we're back to 2008. So just my thoughts on that, but it's interesting to see how the conservatives are dealing with it. Russ in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Hey, Russ, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Just wondering, do you know when the dates are coming up for either the next budget vote or extending the national debt?
The national debt is going to hit in either mid-March or mid-April, and I'm pretty sure it's mid-March. But so it's coming up within a month, and 6 weeks is probably at the most, or 8 weeks, and there is a budget ceiling, and they are going to have to raise the national debt limit, and it's going to be real interesting to see how the Republicans deal with this after holding the national debt hostage 5-6 times during the Obama presidency in order to extract concessions from him.
Yeah. under different circumstances, I'd say it'd be fun, but nothing that's going on right now is fun.
Yeah, I agree. But watch this space. It's see, they haven't really started legislating. I mean, it's so far it's just been grab bag goodies, right? Let's give the coal companies the right to dump coal poison in the rivers. It'll make them more profitable. Let's make it harder for people to vote. Let's start that ball rolling. But none of this really gets to the structural stuff, the core stuff. Obamacare is part of the core stuff of our economy. Healthcare is a multi-trillion-dollar a year industry, as it were, and messing with that is going to change things. Our tax code, they want to change our tax code. And deregulating the banksters. They want to do it with Dodd-Frank and the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and things like that. When they start doing that kind of stuff, you're going to see some rather profound and rather negative changes. And at that point, I disagree with what was his name, Snyder? Yeah, Michael Snyder, who wrote the piece that I was just sharing with you. That if it happens right now, that Trump can blame it on Obama. I know he'll try to do that, but we're far enough into the Trump administration right now that I think people are going to say, "Oh yeah, Trump did this. The Republicans did it." Anyhow, Russ, thanks for the call. Helen in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Helen, thanks for listening. It's 1470 AM. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Happy President's Day.
Thanks. Back at you.
Thank you. It's so good to be hearing FDR's voice rather than our current president.
Yes.
Saying, yeah, I welcome your hatred. And he was a beloved president. I know he was talking to his fellow billionaires, but a lot of people really do hate Donald Trump, and he doesn't realize it.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I mean, we shouldn't. Hatred can be a blinding force.
Use that word. That's a bad word.
Yeah.
Single payer. When I was listening to the guy who
Wendell Potter.
Potter, who used to work for the insurance industry. I've been working on this with a group around here, New York State single payer, and we did get it passed last year through the Assembly and almost through the Senate. But there's a good probability. I'm very happy for California. There's a good probability that we might get it passed through the Senate because we've got a screwed up Senate here. We've got like 9 senators who are dinos, like Democrats.
Yeah, you've got, and one in particular who votes with the Republicans all the time and kind of flipped the power dynamic in New York.
Yes, and most of them are from downstate, and people have wisened up to this because they've seen their voting patterns for the past 2 years.
Right.
They're up for re-election.
They're going to get primaried.
Lose. So we might be able to get that through the Senate. But and I'm glad. I'm sure that Governor Brown, is not going to veto this, unlike Schwarzenegger.
Right.
So California is going to have it, and that's good because they tried to have a referendum about controlling the prices of prescription drugs, and they did that through referendum.
Right, and Big Pharma came in with hundreds of millions of dollars and blew it up.
Yeah, that people didn't understand it, and the pharmaceutical industry, killed it. So this is going to go through. I think that's good.
I think so too. And in New York, what can people do who want to support single-payer efforts in New York State? Is it the same? Go to National Nurses United or go to Physicians for National Healthcare Program, PNHP.org, that kind of thing?
National Healthcare is a good source, excellent source, the perfect source, actually. And the nurses are, I forget the name of their union.
National Nurses United.
And to just call their senators, the state senators.
Yeah, and I think National Nurses United is NNU.org, although I might be wrong. I would plug it into a search engine. But, we used to have Michael Lighty on all the time when he was representing them. Helen, thank you. That's good news for the day, for President's Day. Thanks so much for the call. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, which even though it's 2017, this book is actually more relevant than ever before, and I think one of my most important books. This is from the introduction. I was around 10 years old, the total science fiction junkie. Amazing Stories, a pulp magazine of science fiction short stories, commentary, and science news arrived every month, and that meant that on that day, all homework and play were forgotten. These were some of the most brilliant stories written for a penny a word by people such as Robert Silverberg, Jack Vance, Poul Anderson, and Frank Herbert, who would go on to become the biggest names in the field of fantasy and sci-fi. And one particular story haunted me for years. 8 years later, when the first men landed on the moon, that story brought back to me as if I'd read it the day before. In the story, a group of astronauts are finally, for the first time, going to blast off from Earth and circle the moon. It had never been done, and because our moon doesn't rotate on its axis like we do relative to the sun, but instead circles us with a single side always facing us, nobody had ever seen the dark backside of the moon. These men would be the first in human history to do so. The rocket roared to life from the launch pad, the astronauts chatting with mission control as they hurtled toward the moon. When they got close enough, they let the moon's light gravity grab their space capsule, and with a few deft rocket thrusts, they put themselves into orbit around it. They were unbelievably excited, as were the NASA folks on the ground, chattering back and forth about what they hoped and expected to see. Was the dark side of the moon identical to the front, or was it more mountainous? Might it be frozen water there, since it has a different exposure to the sun? Might there even be wreckage there from ancient astronauts or something else exotic like that? Anything was possible. As the astronauts began their turn around the backside of the moon, Mission Control told them they'd lose communication because the giant mass of the moon would block their signals, so they prepared for radio silence. But as they made the turn, they could still hear Mission Control. What they saw as they glimpsed behind the face of the moon, we see on full nights, brought an audible gasp from all of them. One picked up the microphone to radio the ground and tell the horrible story. Another knocked the microphone from his hand with a warning gesture. They continued to circle around the backside of the moon, and the view became clearer and clearer and even more ever more undeniable. Should we report it? A debate, virtually a fistfight, broke out in the capsule. What would it mean for Earthlings? What if nobody believed them? What if they were quarantined upon returning and imprisoned or sent to a mental hospital? I remember what they saw that was so horrifying to the astronauts. The backside of the moon was missing. They were looking into a concave half ball of the front side of the moon, which was made of canvas stretched over an elaborate superstructure of 2x4s nailed together like the scaffolds that held up roller coasters from that era. This science fiction story from my childhood also tells the story of America today on the verge of the crash. On the surface, everything seems okay. Our politicians still talk about promise, hope, and change, and we applaud and feel inspired. The world still uses our money. We still have the strongest military in the world, and our standard of living is still far better than the third world's, though worse than most of the developed world's. We're still by far the wealthiest nation in the world with too many billionaires to count. We still have civility in the streets. We have reality TV and fancy cars. We still vote, at least those with a driver's license and birth certificate. As long as you don't look too closely at our nation, things seem under control. The United States looks whole. The economically, militarily, and scientifically superior United States, as we've come to know it in the past 80 years, seems intact, not only for the whole world to see, but from afar, but also for those of us who live here. But when you go back around the dark backside of our nation, you see the shocking truth. There you see a nation whose core fundamentals have been hollowed out, replaced by balsa wood stilts, and wrapped in a frayed canvas of nationalism and bravado.
a cloak similar to that worn by nearly every great superpower that has ever existed on the planet just before its own eventual collapse. Unlike the canvas moon, the United States was once full and complete. Many of us still have memories of that era of the middle class through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. But today, that middle class, like the canvas moon, has been hollowed out. Middle-class neighborhoods still exist across America, but now they're teetering on stilts of mortgage and credit card debt. As then Labor Secretary Robert Reich testified before Congress in 1994, the net national savings rate, he said, which was at a relatively robust 8.2% of GDP during the 1970s, has dropped to a barely visible 1.8% in the early 1990s. That was just a decade and a half into the Reagan Revolution. Today, it's far worse. The AP headline from February 11, 2009 says it all. Americans have negative savings rate. Hollowed out, too, is our nation's democracy. The spectacle of national elections confronts us every other year, but behind the pomp and circumstance, our democracy has been corroded into an oligarchy as billionaires finance their own political candidates and corporate-funded think tanks do the work once reserved for elected officials in writing and passing legislation. Stripped clean and hollowed out, the United States is more vulnerable today than it's ever been, including during the Great Depression and Civil War. Those fortified pillars that supported a booming middle class are stolen, and without them, America teeters on the verge of the next great crash. Ultimately, this book is a story of how America was dragged into this crash. We are standing today at the edge of the fourth great crash and war in American history. The previous three, each about 80 years apart, were gut-wrenching in their horror and bloodshed, but they ultimately transformed America in ways that made this a greater and more egalitarian nation. The book, The Crash of 2016, The Plot to Destroy America, What We Can Do to Stop It.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I have shared with you my get ready for the Republican tax scam. This is what's coming. Is this whole idea that average working people. I mean, nobody likes paying taxes. I mean, let's just acknowledge what's real. Is everybody looks at their paycheck and says, geez, if I only had that extra $200 they took out or whatever it is, in taxes this month or this week or whatever, think of what I could buy with it. And they don't think in terms of, well, that money that went to taxes is what's paying for the streets out in front that I drive on. It's what's paying for the schools that are educating our kids. It's what's making the quality of my life decent and all those kind of things. So the Republican con job is to try to convince working people that they need to have their taxes lowered. But what happens when you lower taxes on working people is that employers lower wages. It's just that simple. The labor market is a labor market. There's, in every industry, there are basically pay thresholds. And, typically companies follow those. And you change the tax law, and all you're doing is you're really not changing people's take-home pay. That's a reflection of supply and demand in the labor market. It's not a reflection of the tax code. So it will change. So anyhow, I just get ready for the Republican tax scam. It's coming. It's coming. And it's going to be just like it was during Reagan. This is, when Trump was first elected, I kept saying, this is Reagan 2.0. This is the Nazi Reagan, right? Not Nancy Reagan, the Nazi Reagan, the neo-Nazi Reagan, whatever you want to call it. This is what it is. Anyhow, there's a bunch of news, as it were, here today that I wanted to share with you. The first is about Mary Jo White. You will recall, those of you who have watched this show for a long time, that back when we used to be in the other building next to the Heritage Foundation, we used to do our show from down by Union Station. And now we're over by the White House. That used to be just a couple blocks from the Capitol building. So we've moved from, one end of the mall to the other, basically. And right around the corner from us was the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And the SEC has, Congress has passed legislation that gives the commissioner of the Securities and Exchange Commission the power to simply issue a rule that says that all publicly traded companies, that is, any company whose stock you can buy, must, as part of their disclosures to their stockholders, which is a big part of SEC rules, right? If companies, there is a whole long list of things that if publicly traded companies do, they have to disclose to their stockholders. Because, hey, as a stockholder, you have the right to know what's going on with the company that you own a piece of. So one of the things that the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission had the power to do was to say that all publicly traded companies must disclose to their stockholders, in other words, to the public, their political activity, how much money they're spending buying politicians, how much money they're spending lobbying politicians, how much money they're spending funding think tanks and stuff like this. And Public Citizen was lobbying Mary Jo White when she was the head of the SEC to do this. Now, she used to be a member of the corporate defense team at a local law firm here, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. It's Debevoise and Plimpton, Debevoise and Plimpton. And, you know, defending corporations. And she went from that to being the head of the SEC, regulating corporations. And I even tracked down the phone number for her office. It's not a secret. I mean, you know, you can Google it, and put it on the air and said, hey, call Mary Jo White and ask her to put this rule into place to require public corporations to disclose their campaign spending. And it irritated their office. We got a kind of a semi-nastygram from them about it, but, you know, there's nothing they could do about it. But you know, and Public Citizen had posters all over Union Station. There was like, Mary Jo White, save us. And they showed pictures of her in a Superman cape, you know, like she can save the day, right? Well, she didn't save the day. She's a corporate shill. And she's now back with that law firm, defending corporations again. In fact, this is David Dian writing about this over at theintercept.com. Mary Jo White, whose tenure as chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission under President Obama bitterly disappointed those who hoped she would aggressively enforce banking laws, is rejoining the corporate defense team at Debevoise and Plimpton, marking her sixth run through the revolving door. Debevoise represents numerous major financial institutions under federal investigation, and White will now help those corporate clients manage their legal exposure. So there you go. I mean, this is one of the big problems that we have in this country. Another fascinating story that I wanted to share with you. I just, you know, there's so much news, frankly, that just a bunch of things here. The Guardian, this great piece, this was supported by the Skoll Foundation, Jeff Skoll's group, and it's about Texas being an unlikely green leader. And living in New York and Washington, this is by, actually, when I printed it, it didn't print who the author is. So my apologies to the author of this article. It didn't print right. But in any case, it says, living in New York and Washington, Greg Wortham heard all the grand talk about green energy from liberal politicians. Then he returned to the place where he grew up, a small town that embraced wind power so warmly that within a couple of years, the first turbine terminating, it had become some of the biggest wind farms on the planet. He's not from California, Oregon, or New England. He's on the conservative sector of Texas on the edge of the Permian Basin, one of the most bountiful oil and gas patches in the world. And the welcome sign that greets motorists as they arrive in Sweetwater, Texas, along Interstate 20, 3-hour drive west to Dallas, is not in the shape of an oil derrick or a pump jack. It's a wind turbine blade bearing the town's motto, "Life is sweet in Texas." And it's all about how this very conservative, very Texas town, and not just this one town. I mean, this is, you know, Texas is producing 12.5% of all of their electricity now from wind power. And they talk about the county's tax base has soared from roughly $400 million in 2000 to about $3 billion today as a result of a dramatic investment in wind that began in earnest under the governorships of George W. Bush and Rick Perry. Seriously. Now, Rick Perry is obviously not singing that song now that, you know, he's got the Koch brothers behind him to become the Secretary of Energy and all that kind of thing, you know, or I don't know if it's Koch brother, but basically fossil fuel money. But it's a remarkable story about how wind power is growing and growing rapidly in the United States in conservative areas. Iowa gets 20% of their electricity from wind power now. It's happening. It's real. The cost of this power has dropped so much that it easily competes with coal, oil, or natural gas. And you put windmills on your ranch, you can still run the cattle around. I mean, the windmills don't come down to ground level. The pole does, obviously, but the blades don't. There's no risk from them. And so you can still have cattle, but you get money from making that wind power, right, on your land. And so these ranchers, it's like a whole brand new world for them. Meanwhile, the White House, a lot of us kind of bought this story about Jared Kushner that, he's kind of liberal and he's a lifelong Democrat, and Ivanka, his wife, is a Democrat, and, they're going to be a moderating influence on the president. And some even suggested that, because he was Jewish, he would be more of a moderating influence with, Trump's wild, arguably anti-Semitic, if you consider Arab Semites, which they are, rants against Muslims and whatnot, that Jared Kushner would be a moderating influence on Donald Trump. Turns out not so much. Aaron Rupar is writing over at thinkprogress.org. During a recent meeting, White House senior advisor and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, told an executive from Time Warner, the parent company of CNN, that the Trump administration is upset with that network's critical coverage of Trump. Specifically, they were upset with Van Jones and Ana Navarro, two people of color who are on CNN who have called out Donald Trump. This is the quote. Mr. Kushner has taken issue with specific CNN contributors, including Van Jones, a Democrat who served in the Obama administration, and Ana Navarro, a Republican strategist, who have each criticized Mr. Trump in harsh terms, people familiar with the matter said, according to the Wall Street Journal. So you don't like the coverage from CNN, so you bring in the senior executives of its parent company, Time Warner, and complain about it? This is, to the best of my knowledge, something like this has never happened. Although, who knows? But this is not healthy for a democracy. Trying to use corporate power to silence the media. And it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of profile Ana Navarro and Van Jones have at CNN going forward. I would encourage you to pay careful attention. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls. My thoughts on the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Joe in Adrian, Michigan. I've been to Adrian, Michigan. It's a beautiful little town. Hey, Joe, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today? Joe?
Yeah.
Oh. Hey, you're on the air.
Oh, Mr.
Yes.
Hartmann?
Yes. Joe, you are on the air right now. Don't listen to your TV, listen to your telephone, because there's a time delay. What's on your mind?
Mr. Hartmann, how are you?
I am well. What's up?
So many people, they are not accepting.
Joe, if your TV is turned up, you need to turn it down right now, because it's going to totally confuse you. And let's get right to it, or I'm going to have to move to the next caller. Okay, go ahead.
They are not accepting that Mr. Trump won the election.
Right.
He is our president.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he is. He did win the election.
Yeah, he won the election.
At least in the Electoral College. What's your point?
Yeah, and I have never heard you, when you are mentioning, saying President Trump, you always say Trump, not even Mr. Trump.
That's correct.
Well, he is our president, Mr. Hartmann.
That does not mean that I have to respect him. I respect the office. I think he is soiling the office, and badly. And, you know, out of my respect for the office of President of the United States, I will not refer to him that way. Joe, thanks for the call. But Sarah in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, Sarah, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Take you off the speaker real quick.
Thank you, Sarah.
There you go. You're a last caller. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you for keeping me sane.
You're welcome. It keeps
yeah.
me sane to do this. I got to tell you, Sarah.
It's crazy. A couple of weeks ago, you asked a question of what this administration is doing to relationships within your life, and I'll tell you that, like during the election, my mother, who is a Trump supporter, we could talk, but after he got elected, it's like a screaming match, and she screams at me. She's called me because I marched on that Saturday, and so I'm a domestic terrorist.
Whoa!
I know. And
have you considered just not talking politics with your mother?
Yeah, but she keeps bringing it up.
Yeah.
But yesterday it was interesting. One thing that she said was she's not getting any newspapers anymore. She's not listening to any type of the only thing that she's listening to is what's coming out of his mouth, because that's the only true thing that's happening.
Does that mean she's watching Fox News exclusively?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, this is Fox News is a cult. Roger Ailes was a cult leader. And
crazy. Yesterday she said how Melania Trump has been treated so badly because she has, get ready. She has a PhD in communications.
Oh, my.
She speaks 10 different languages.
Oh, my. Sarah, you need to watch the movie The Brainwashing of My Dad. I think it'll be helpful for you. Thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I got to tell you about Paris.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
On Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, a couple of I've got this giant pile of stuff that I wanted to share with you today, and we're in a third hour of our program, so I'll pick up some of your phone calls in just a few minutes, but a few other things I want to share with you. I got this from movetoamend.org. I'm a I don't know what you call it, a supporter, I guess, and I'm on their email list. And the headline is Trump's billionaire cabinet actually a closet full of fascists? And they say, yes, Donald Trump's cabinet will end up being the richest in modern history, worth around $4.5 billion at conservative estimates, but many billions more if you include the family wealth of his appointees and, of course, Trump himself. And then they get into wealth in and of itself is only part of the larger problem. It is the connection of wealth to power that can transform a democracy into a totalitarian state. And it's really a remarkable history lesson. They go back all the way back to 1897 and McKinley. And they say he was the only president who has appointed more corporatists than Donald Trump. And, of course, that led to the great crash of 1890. I thought it was the great crash of 1897. It might have been 1898, but it was right around there. And they talk about Naomi Klein. And so I just want to share that with you. It's really worth getting on their mailing list. The other one is Progressive Democrats of America. These are great organizations, pdamerica.org. Progress doesn't just happen. It takes hard work, dedication. And then they go through the list of what they've done. In 2016, they launched the Sanders Run, Bernie, Run thing. They co-convened the Historic People's Summit in Chicago. They helped elect 236 Bernie delegates to the DNC in Philly. They organized Progressive Central, the People's Convention, with allies including Keystone Progress, DSA, The Nation, and others. They ran phone banks, mobilizing voters, canvassed and provided other supports for a whole bunch of, Jayapal, Noland, Gabbard, Raskin, Berrigan, these people who are now members of Congress, progressive members of Congress, as a result of the efforts of PDA, pdamerica.org. They helped with our advisory board, all of our advisory board members, Ellison, Grijalva, Lee, Conyers, McGovern win re-election, along with our progressive heroes, including Representatives Pocan, Coleman, and Schakowsky. They launched the Young Progressives Demanding Action, YPDA. They increased their chapter growth and new chapter building by 25%. And they marked the 10th anniversary of their Healthcare Not Welfare campaign. And, so it's a list of everything that they're doing and where they're going. And it's really great stuff. The AFL-CIO sent out, I'm on their email list also, and I think this is probably more like because I'm a reporter, but or in the media. Tom, this month, 21,000 working people at AT&T's Verizon division voted to authorize a strike. It wasn't an easy choice. No one wants to go on strike, but they needed to send a message to AT&T because the company is demanding workers do more work for less. Despite making $13 billion in profits last year and record profits in its wireless division, AT&T has cut more than 8,000 call center jobs and outsourced many of those jobs to low-wage countries. So they're asking people to sign a petition to Randall Stevenson. He's the CEO of AT&T, saying, I support good jobs and a fair union contract, et cetera, et cetera. So, people are taking action. Meanwhile, over at The Hill, Jonathan Easley writing the headline, Americans brimming with optimism on the economy. This is exactly where we were at in 2007, by the way, in my opinion. A strong majority of Americans say the U.S. economy is running strong, and most believe the upward trend will continue under President Trump, according to a Harvard-Harris poll provided exclusively to The Hill. 61% view the economy as strong, 39% weak. So how's that going to play out, particularly if there is a crash? And I'm not rooting for one. It's just, this is the way things go. And then finally, the last story I want to share with you, this is from commondreams.org, Child's Play. Team Trump rewrites the Department of Energy website for kids. And this is pretty amazing what they did. The page dedicated to coal, they deleted this sentence. In the United States, most of the coal consumed is used as a fuel to generate electricity. Burning coal produces emissions that adversely affect the environment and human health. They deleted that from the website. There were two, the sentence reuse and recycle can also reduce coal's environmental impact was changed to reusing and recycling can also reduce the environmental effects of coal production and use. The impacts of coal mining, underground mines, it goes on and on. Fracking. It used to say there are environmental concerns associated with hydraulic fracturing. Now it says hydraulic fracturing has some effect on the environment. It's bizarre.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is the Department of Energy before Rick Perry has taken it over. I mean, they are rolling over in the Team Trump. We'll be back. As of this morning, nearly 130,000 Facebook users have, quote, checked in. So this is all over social media because people actually care, right? People want to know what's going on. White people, too. But is it going to make it into Is it going to make it into the corporate media? Have you seen anything in the corporate media? I mean, occasionally there's a passing reference. Oh, those crazy Indians, they're talking about sacred land. We all know land isn't sacred. You pay property taxes on land. Land is property. Right? There's nothing alive there. Ancestors, what are you talking about? Come on. That's not our culture. See, this is the riff. I mean, this is a third of the book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, is where we say we are an inclusive country. Everybody's welcome. It's the great melting pot. Isn't that a wonderful thing? But there's really a subset message to that. I mean, that's the principal message, and that's the myth that we live out. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to be successful in this society, you need to learn to talk like a white person, to behave like a white person, to plug into the white power structure in this country. White privilege is real. And people of color can sometimes acquire a little bit of it, as it were. But never the whole thing. Of course, never the whole thing. So how much is the fact that the corporate media in the United States, which is virtually entirely white-controlled, virtually entirely, the vast majority of the producers are white, the vast majority of the reporters are white, the vast majority of the executives are white, the owners and the large stockholders are virtually all white. What kind of impact does that have on what kind of news gets covered? And how that news gets covered? Now, you ask minorities in this country, they'll tell you, we've been noticing it for years and years. I remember back in the 60s, I played a Dick Gregory album, The Light Side, The Dark Side, four sides, back to back, the whole thing, when I was doing an all-night progressive rock show, and I got fired for it. The only time I've ever been fired. WVIC in Lansing, Michigan. And you've probably heard, I've told the story before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But one of the points that Dick Gregory made in that album, and over the years, I've gotten to know him. We've been to Europe together. We've been to Africa together. His son is my chiropractor. It's like he's a great guy. He lives here in D.C. now. He's been on this program, in fact, most recently, just 6 months ago or so. And he made the comment that the only images growing up as a young black man in St. Louis, Missouri, that the only images that he saw of black women were basically Aunt Jemima. And he made the joke, and I never wanted to have sex with Aunt Jemima, or words to that effect. And that was, back then, it was like the media was just like so clearly, so completely a white-controlled media, as it were. And it was of, by, and for, essentially, white people. People of color pretty much didn't exist in our media, except as character actors. And the characters, of course, were always bad guys, or stupid people, or buffoons. And, yes, that started to change with the primetime rule when you got independent production companies producing television programs in the 70s and 80s, and it started getting better in the 90s, and it's better today. You're seeing, more diversity on television, but it still doesn't reflect the diversity of America. And it doesn't even begin to reflect the people who were the original, any part of the lives of the people who were the original occupants of this continent. So I'm of the opinion that the reason that you're seeing no Standing Rock coverage, if you want to get Standing Rock coverage, you gotta tune in Amy Goodman or listen to this program, basically.
The reason why is that it's not white people. Now, I know when I go off on these rants about white privilege, I get all these conservative callers telling me I'm nuts. Feel free. Convince me I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong about this. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what a fascinating day. It's a beautiful day, by the way, in Washington, D.C. It's spring is coming so much earlier with global warming. But summer's promised to get really brutal, especially down in Texas. It's I mean, we're looking at the Arctic. It's 50 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it should be this winter. And, you know, we're in for some wild weather. Rich in Sedro-Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Well, I can't take full credit for this. I believe it was the caller on the Signorelli show who mentioned that it would be a great thing if Washington and Oregon could get together with California and come up with a single-payer Cascadia plan.
Mm-hmm. You know, if California passes single payer and actually implements it, it wouldn't surprise me if nearby states, particularly Oregon and Washington State, started joining in.
Also form like a political progressive bloc out here on the West Coast that could be applied to things like, well, the marijuana laws, where if they would start promoting industrial hemp, it would solidify those laws, since all three states are already marijuana friendly.
Yep. Did you ever read Ernest Kallenbach's book, Ecotopia?
Yes, I have. I have.
It's happening.
We can only hope.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. It's and to people listening to this conversation, this was I think it was a New York Times bestseller. It was a big book anyway, back in the 1970s, maybe the late 60s, but I think it was the early 70s. And Kallenbach has now died, I'm pretty sure, and I think the book is still in print. I know when I reread it back 5-6 years ago, I got a used copy. I just saw it the other day, in fact. But I'm not sure if I did that because I was a cheapskate or because the new versions are not in print. But it's about what happens when basically Northern California, Oregon, and Washington State secede from the United States, landmine their border with the rest of the United States with nuclear weapons, and become basically a progressive paradise, while the rest of the United States just kind of devolves into becoming Alabama and becoming Mississippi or Louisiana, becoming, segregated and poor and angry and no services and whatnot. And it's a remarkable, it's a novel. It's just a remarkable story. So, Rich, spot on. I got to move along, but thank you for the call, Rich. Kurt in Los Angeles. Hey, Kurt, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Happy President's Day to you.
Back at you, Kurt. What's up?
Hey, well, as you know, it is President's Day, and I just finished watching a biography on National Geographic on Abraham Lincoln, and I was reminded that the South started their secession within weeks, within days of President Lincoln's election. And by the time his inauguration came around, it was pretty much in place.
Oh, yeah.
Seven states that had already separated. And why did they separate? Because they were so committed to the idea of slavery and serfdom that they were willing to break up the Union just at the idea that a president that was liberal and was talking about ending slavery had come into power. That's
absolutely right. And anybody who doubts that, anybody, like when we lived in Atlanta, when several of our kids were going through elementary school, and they were learning about the War of Northern Aggression, right? Whereas I, grew up in Michigan, and I learned about the Civil War, the War of the Southern Traitors, basically. And if anybody doubts what you just said, Kurt, they need to read the South Carolina Proclamation of Secession. It says right there, to defend, well, I don't know if it's this exact language, but it's so clear, that they are doing this to defend slavery, period, full stop.
Right. So now, and at the end of the Civil War, a meme started that the South shall rise again, and it's anonymous. I keep looking for who actually said it, but it's put as anonymous. The South shall
Oh,
rise
it was in
again.
songs. It was, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, but here's the thing, Tom. It's real important for you. Let me go. It's happened, Tom. The
I
South
agree.
has risen again. For a long time, they used force. For a long time, the Klan, run around burning crosses and kicking black kids out of, burning down churches and schools, black schools. But now it's to the point to where they figured out, if you can't beat them with violence, join them. And so they have infiltrated the upper echelons of government, like I've been telling for 2 years. And we now have white nationalists, people who, we have news organizations that are coming out straight out saying that these are white nationalists that are in control of the helms of power right now. And I'm of the mindset that the tables have been turned. Now, the difference between then and now is that in the 1860s, cotton was king. Our entire the number one economy was cotton at the time. It was just that it was a necessary evil that we couldn't live without. And Lincoln tried to change that the best way he could with the Industrial Revolution. But if you look at today, Tom, the blue states outperform the red states 10-1. We don't need the red states no more. That's why I'm all for Cal exit. And I think California, along with New York, Hawaii, which is the best place to vacation, Oregon, all the other blue states that did not cheat to win this last election, we all need to break away and start our own thing. If they want to cheat, let them have it, just like a card game. If somebody wants to cheat, boom, I'm getting up from the table.
Well, what's happening, Kurt, right now is that the experiment, the red state experiment, is failing. Probably the most underreported story in America right now is that Sam Brownback and the Republican legislature of Kansas just raised taxes. Brownback came into office and said, we're going to prove that Reagan was right. We're going to prove that trickle-down economics works, radically cut taxes on wealthy people in Kansas, which would include at least one of the Koch brothers who lives there. And what it did was it threw the state into turmoil. Huge budget crisis, huge budget deficit. Cutting back on schools, cutting back on social service. It's a disaster. Kansas even lost their credit rating. I mean, the credit rating got downgraded, I believe, twice. And so now they've finally said, okay, oops, this experiment is playing out in really grim ways as more and more states become, right to work for less states. So wages start falling as they, just the whole thing. I think at some point, Kurt, it's going to be real obvious to people that, who live in Kansas, for example, that Thomas Frank famously wrote the book, What's the Matter with Kansas, about, that, the Republican model literally doesn't work. And the Democratic model actually does, because you're absolutely right. It's not 10-1, but the Democratic states are massively outperforming the red states. The blue states are outperforming the red states. And in fact, the blue states are putting all the money into the federal government. The red states are taking all this money out of the federal government. They are basically the welfare states. They're the moochers, as it were. And, we need to tell people about that. You're spot on, Kurt. Thanks a lot for the call. You very well said. Mark in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm a first-time caller. My brother told me about 2 years ago when you were in Oregon.
Yeah, thank you.
And I like your show, but what do we do that is still legal but more drastic? The marching, got to keep up the marching, hide our money away in books in our house.
Mark, the most radical thing that you can do, the thing that will have the greatest impact on our democracy, is to show up at your local Democratic Party and help take the thing over and help re-energize it. We have, there's about 32 or 3,600 counties in the United States. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number at the tip of my tongue here, but it's over 3,000 counties in the United States. And in about 2,000 of those 3,000 counties, the Democratic parties are functionally dead. They're moribund. They're not working the way they should. And it's because we got fat and happy. We thought during the 8 years of Obama that, hey, we got a great president. He's got things under control. No need to show up, no need to be activists, no need to, move in progressive directions. And, that was a mistake. And, that illusion has been ripped away from us by the result of this last election. And working, I've always been an advocate of working outside the power structure. It's what I've done my entire life. I mean, from being a teenager in SDS to today supporting groups like I was talking about earlier, ourrevolution.com and pdamerica.org and movetoamend.org and whatnot. But working within the system right now, as the system itself is under assault by Trump and his billionaire buddies, working within the system is the place where you can have maximum impact if you have the kind of personality that can do that. I mean, there are some people who just, it's not their thing to be inside the system. But if you are, that's really, really where the change is going to happen. Mark, thanks so much for the call. And if you're not, if you don't feel comfortable saying, okay, I'm going to get inside the Democratic Party and really become an activist, pick one of these organizations on the outside that really speaks to your desires and work with them.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You love the environment? Join the Sierra Club. I mean, there's so many different, there are river keepers. There's so many great organizations out there that whatever you're into, you can find one to join. And welcome back. Tom in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Tom, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Great. Well, I just wanted to kind of bring up, being that it was President's Day, and you were talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I think there's the other Roosevelt that should get a little more recognition than he's had, and that's Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right, the progressive Republican.
He was. I fell into him after I read John Adams. David McCullough at the end of the book was talking about other books, and then he got me interested to read Morning on Horseback. And then from there I jumped into Edwin Morris's 3-volume Teddy Roosevelt, and then I read Doris Goodwin's Bully Pulpit,
right.
And I was just really amazed at how really cool and strong this guy was.
Yep.
And how he actually stood up to J.P. Morgan.
He was what Donald Trump pretends to be.
Yes.
The tough-speaking guy who's going to take on the entrenched powers and do it on behalf of the people. That's Donald Trump's sales pitch, and that's what all these poor Republicans think that they voted for. And instead, they've got a narcissistic billionaire. Teddy Roosevelt was a genuine populist. Donald Trump is a phony populist.
I agree totally. And if you go to his new nationalism speech that he did in Kansas and see what, at that time in 1910, what he wanted to get proposed in our social makeup, I guess.
Right.
It is so great and so progressive,
Well, after he left
the White House. I wonder
if
that's one of the reasons why his cream hasn't really risen to the top.
Well, it's the reason why Teddy Roosevelt's cream hasn't risen to the top is twofold. The Republicans don't want to own him because he was opposed to corporate power, just openly opposed to corporate power. And Republicans have totally sold out to corporate power in America. They are the corporate party. And the Democrats don't want to own him because he was a Republican, and they don't want to say anything nice about a Republican. And so, therefore, Teddy Roosevelt kind of slips through the cracks. Also, that speech in 1910, he was out of office at that point in time and, planning to run for president in 1912 on the Bull Moose Party platform because the Republicans wouldn't have him anymore. And he got real progressive once he left office. I mean, he was damn good in the White House. But when he was when he tried to make his comeback, man, he was really rolling along.
Yeah, and just one more point. The fact that he actually told J.P. Morgan that he wasn't going to run the country, that Teddy Roosevelt was elected president and he was going to run it. I really got little goosebumps when I read that.
Yeah.
That he actually stood up to these rich, at those time, millionaires, but they would be billionaires.
Yeah.
Where we are right now. And I wish someone would take part of his history called The River of Doubt and make that into a great movie, because I was amazed that he went on that adventure down the Amazon after he lost the 1912 election. So, anyways, that's my 2 cents. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're on the air. Thank you. for your service and all the other progressive voices that we have out there.
You're quite welcome, Tom. Thanks a lot for the call. And I'll play a Teddy Roosevelt clip if I can find it here right after this break in memory of your memory of Teddy Roosevelt. Thanks, Tom. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, it's President's Day, and here we go. This is Theodore Roosevelt, and this is a speech he gave to the Progressive Boys Club in 1913 in New York City. And this was recorded by Thomas Edison, and it was on one of those wax cylinders back in the day, or maybe they were the early plastic Bakelite, I think they were making them out of. And so it sounds pretty scratchy, but if it's the clip I think it is, I haven't previewed it, but I'm pretty sure this is the clip I think it is. Check this out. This is Teddy Roosevelt, not Franklin Roosevelt. This is the Republican progressive.
The principles for which we stand are the principles of fair play and a square deal for every man and every woman in the United States.
This guy was a real populist.
A square deal politically, a square deal in matters social and industrial. I wish to see you boys join the Progressive Party and act in that party and as good citizens in the same way I'd expect any one of you to act in a football game. In other words, don't flinch, don't foul, and hit the line hard.
Hit the line hard. Teddy Roosevelt talking to the Progressive Boys Club. And now the Progressive Party, of course, there was fusion voting in New York State. There still is. And so you could register in the Progressive Party and still vote for a Republican, essentially, which is what Teddy Roosevelt arguably was. I mean, he had, by that point in time, the Republicans had pretty much kind of kicked him out. But fascinating. Mona in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, Mona, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I want to thank you, first of all, for all that you do, and you're so loved. Anyway, I wanted to talk about California having their state-owned bank. I called Bernie probably about 8 years ago and asked him this question, and everybody thought I was crazy because I've been calling the senator and the governor and our congressman, the state treasury, to have California have their state-owned bank like North Dakota, because all the money, instead of the CEOs getting those golden bonuses, and I mean, it's $1 trillion a year. It's billions of dollars in profits that the New York banks are making off California. Yeah, and if we started our state-owned bank and that money went back into creating jobs for programs for school for kids that have problems after school. Yep. Our own infrastructure, and years ago everybody said, "Oh yeah, you can't do that. Go do it, Mona. You're nuts." But anyway, you started talking about it about 6 months ago, and I kind of got some recognition that I wasn't so nuts.
Oh, I've been talking about this for years, Mona. The person who really woke me up about it was Ellen Brown. Her website is webofdebt.com, which is also the title of one of her books. And she has been preaching the song for years now of state-owned banks, that every state in the union should have a state-owned bank and do like North Dakota did. And you're absolutely right. It just it's just like single-payer health care, only it's for the banking industry rather than for the health care industry. And it produces enormous profits for the state, which the state can then use to do everything from high-speed rail to arguably funding, if California really wants to have single-payer health care, if they created a state-owned bank and ran all their money through the bank and then used the profits from that to fund their single-payer health care system, they would really be in Fat City. So, yeah, you're spot on, Mona. Thank you so much for the call. John in West Chicago, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? John? John is not listening to his phone. Kevin in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind today?
I wanted to talk about, you said that the South seceded on the basis of slavery, but I wanted to make an argument that it was states' rights only because...
It was the states' right to maintain slavery. Again, Kevin, read the South Carolina Declaration of Secession. They make it very clear.
They were against the new states having the right to declare non-slavery, and they saw their advantage slipping away.
Yeah, if you're going to take it, you're taking it back to the Missouri Compromise. That was in the 1820s, the late 1820s, not the 1850s or 60s.
And if I may change subjects, I did announce on the Santa Fe Plaza during our Women's March a couple weeks back, over 13,500. I also attended my ward meeting Saturday under your encouragement, and I got the luckiest thing. My chair has a New Mexico Democratic family going back 2 generations. My secretary is a former county chair, county clerk.
Cool. So you inserted yourself into the Democratic Party.
But I'm a Republican because I switched.
Oh, interesting. So you inserted yourself.
It's a scheme to save North Carolina from gerrymandering and voter suppression by having everybody switch to Republicans. Not working out.
Okay, Kevin, good luck with that. I wish you the best. Robert in South Carolina. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind? Speaking of South Carolina.
Garfield quotes. I'd like to read one. Whoever controls the volume of money in our country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. When you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate. James A. Garfield.
There you go. President of the United States. You'll find similar sentiments coming from Abraham Lincoln, coming from Thomas Jefferson, coming from Garfield, from... oh, geez, who was the Democrat who was elected in 1884? I think it was the election of 1884. Brain fart. But anyhow, there's a bunch of his inaugural address or his State of the Union address in 1886, as I recall, was about he talked about the iron heel of industry is upon the neck of the average American, and which is an astonishing thing. So we've had a number of presidents who've called this out. And this is my point. Robert, thank you for that. This is my point about Donald Trump is that, he's pretending to be Teddy Roosevelt. He's pretending to be the guy who talks tough and takes on the entrenched power interests in the system. But in fact, he is the entrenched power interests. He has surrounded himself with the entrenched power interests. He's got a cabinet full of multimillionaires and billionaires, and he is dancing to the tune of the entrenched interest. So he's a phony Teddy Roosevelt. The only question in my mind is how long is it going to be before the Trump voters figure this out? As long as they keep their heads buried in Fox News, Fox so-called news, it's probably going to be quite a while because that cult is very, very, very effective. But, if they start paying attention to what's going on in the world, it's going to shake a number of people up. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It does require all of us to participate. That includes you. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels
naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com.